Chapter 1410. Following the elimination of the mid-stage constellation cultivator targeted by Lu Yi, the remaining 9 people from both teams realized one thing. This disabled team that had suddenly barged in wasn't just here to watch the show. They were here to cause trouble, and their strength was quite impressive. Lu Yi's technique was unleashed once more, this time targeting another mid-stage constellation realm cultivator. Learning from his predecessor's mistakes, this person wanted to dodge, but he was still a step too late. He hastily blocked a few techniques and was already out of strength. Just as he was about to follow in his companion's footsteps, a burly figure brazenly rushed in front of him. The chi and blood in his body surged, and a layer of blood-colored shadow swelled up beside this burly figure, turning into a solid defense. It was the body cultivator of this team who had come to protect him. Many spells bombarded, causing the blood-colored shadow to sway. The body cultivator was stunned. He had seen someone being eliminated just now, so he knew that the opponent was not weak. Only now did he personally experience the strength of Fang Minglai's enemy. If not for the fact that he was a body cultivator and had a strong defense, other people might not have been able to block it. The one who used the spell was clearly only a mid-stage constellation cultivator. What made him even more stunned was that the 3 members of the disabled team did not have any intention of changing directions and just directly crashed into him. The body cultivator was so angry that he laughed. The leader of the disabled team was obviously a spell cultivator. Since he was a spell cultivator, he should be able to use spells from a distance. At this moment, he had the intention of closing in on him. He was underestimating him too much. The body cultivator was not the only one who realized Lu Yi's intention. Chu Shen and Lucky Star, who were connected to him, also realized it. When he saw Lu Yi eliminate one person in one move, Chu Shen was secretly excited. He felt that the powerhouses at the top of the rankings were indeed worthy of their reputation. He had hugged a very thick thigh this time and was willing to be its leg hair. But now, Lu Yi was charging towards the body cultivator with a determined expression and full of vigor. Chu Shen's heart could not help but beat wildly. Yet, the body cultivator was a late-stage constellation cultivator. Like the body cultivator, he could not understand what Lu Yi was trying to do. Would there be a good end to barging into someone else's battle like this? He even had the urge to leave the formation to avoid suffering with Lu Yi. But in the next moment, he gritted his teeth and followed closely behind Lu Yi. He remembered Fa Wuzuan's previous warning that he and Lucky Star had to have a certain degree of trust in him. Therefore, he concluded that a person who could rank within the top 20 on the leaderboard with his mid-stage cultivation could not be a brainless person. He must have his reasons for doing so. Of course, the biggest reason why he made this decision was because he had a life-saving treasure. Under the rules of the Constellation Hall, he was confident that his life would not be in any danger. Since there was no danger to his life, it seemed that there was nothing wrong with going crazy. Just as he made up his mind, his expression froze. This was because he saw that Fa Wuzuan in front of him had a pitch-black saber in his hand. What followed was an earth-shaking collision. Violent spiritual energy swept out in all directions, accompanied by an angry roar and a muffled groan. Chu Shen clearly felt that the formation of the 3 people on his side was slightly obstructed for a moment, and then it suddenly became unobstructed. Under the influence of Qi, he followed closely behind Lu Yi and swept past the body cultivator blocking the way. Out of the corner of his vision, he caught a glimpse of the blooming of blood, and a clear smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose. His expression was a little confused because if he wasn't mistaken just now, he seemed to have seen something incredible. When he hurriedly turned his head to take a look, he indeed saw an unbelievable scene. The burly body cultivator who had blocked his way was now holding his neck and falling down diagonally. Between his fingers, blood was gushing out like a tide. More than half of his neck had been cut off. The bright red color of blood made Chu Shen's pupils suddenly shrink. Such a terrible injury was almost a fatal blow. It should be known that the body cultivator was known for his rough skin and thick flesh. He even suspected that Fa Wuzuan had deliberately held back. Otherwise, the injury could not have been so subtle. It was not enough to take the person's life, but it was enough to make the person lose the ability to fight. Thinking about it this way, Fa Wuzuan's true strength was stronger than he had expected. Next, he saw numerous magic techniques and overwhelming sword beams sweeping towards them from all directions. Shockingly, the cultivators from the two teams that were fighting each other earlier were attacking them. The two teams that were fighting fiercely, because of the strong addition of a third party, instantly buried the hatchet. Although it was not to the extent of joining forces to fight the enemy, they were still fighting together. Especially the team that had lost a body cultivator, their attacks were especially fierce. Chu Shun let out a strange cry and immediately summoned a defensive spiritual artifact to protect the three of them. He did not have many other things in his hands, but defensive spiritual treasures were the most abundant. It was all thanks to his mother. Many attacks came, and Lu Ye's figure moved, dodging some of them. Some were blocked by Chu Shin's defensive spiritual treasure, and some were blocked by Lucky Star's means. This round of attacks was dazzling, but it did not hurt the three of them at all. Chu Shen was excited because he realized that under the effect of the twin chi-linked branches array disc, the power of his spiritual treasure was much greater than usual, and it could provide a stronger defense. This was something to be expected. After all, he was in the early stage of the constellation realm. No matter how good a spiritual treasure was in his hands, its power would be reduced. However, under the premise that he could borrow power, he could use the spiritual treasure's power as much as possible. In his excitement, he blurted out, "Dao brother, leave the defense to us. You just need to focus on hacking and hacking." As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Yi slashed out with his saber again. This time, the saber seemed to strike empty air, but as the saber fell, a cry of surprise rang out. A ghostly figure suddenly appeared, as if it had slammed into the saber itself. This person was holding a short blade in his hand. The short blade flickered like a snake's tongue, and he was about to attack Lucky Star from the side. This was obviously a ghost cultivator. Blood flew out again, and this ghost cultivator's body was sent flying like a ragged sack. Lu Yi did not stop moving. He changed directions and faced the chaotic attacks coming from the front and the side. He fixed his eyes on a sword cultivator who was controlling a flying sword. Seeing this, how could the sword cultivator dare to face him head-on? It had only been 10 breaths since the appearance of this disabled team, but in these 10 breaths, 3 people had already been killed, and one of them was a late-stage body cultivator. Sword light burst out around him, and he flashed to the side. He wanted to meet up with his companions and avoid Lu Ye's attack. At the same time, the rain of swords fell like a waterfall. Lu Yi did not care and charged forward. The rain of swords was blocked by Chu Shin's spiritual treasure and Lucky Star. Occasionally, a fish escaped the net, but he could use Holy Guard to block it. With a raise of his hand, the deity's striking whip lashed out. The long whip condensed from pure spiritual power lashed at the sword cultivator, causing him to stagger. Just as he steadied himself, he realized in despair that Lu Yi was already in front of him. "Save me!" The sword cultivator shouted. Not far away, his companions hurried over, but they were still a step too late. As the long sword slashed down, the sword light was like snow. The sword cultivator's protective spiritual light was broken, and blood spurted out from his body. He was seriously injured in an instant. Lu Yi did not kill him. Instead, he turned the blade and slashed at the cultivator who had just rushed over. That cultivator's face was pale. He only hated himself for being so impulsive and running so fast. When Lu Yi finished off this cultivator, he looked up and saw that there was no one around. With the addition of Chu Shen and Lucky Star, there were only 5 people left in the 2 groups of 10 people who had been fighting fiercely. Moreover, the 5 of them were not in the same group. Seeing that the enemy was so fierce, who dared to stay? They all scattered like birds and beasts, using their methods to escape in all directions. They wanted to escape from this place first and then make plans later. However, how could Lu Yi let them escape? For him, it was not difficult to deal with these enemies. The difficult part was finding their traces. If they escaped now, it would be troublesome to find them. As a speck of blood light bloomed, the sound of a roaring river could be heard, like the angry waves of the sea. The blood light suddenly spread out, enveloping the surroundings and turning into a thick sea of blood. All this time, Lu Yi had tried his best to avoid using the blood sea technique in front of others. Even if he did use it, he would try to kill them all. This was because the more tricks he had up his sleeves, the more likely he would be able to catch his enemies off guard. But what did Fa Wuzuan's blood sea technique have to do with Lu Yi? None of the 5 people escaped the range of the Sea of Blood. However, the 5 of them were all experienced in battle. They knew that this secret technique originated from the Blood clan had a huge drawback, which was that it consumed a lot of the cultivator's spiritual energy. Therefore, the moment they were enveloped by the Sea of Blood, they used all their methods and attacked wildly in all directions. This method was undoubtedly very wise. It could not only prevent a sneak attack, but also increase the consumption of the enemy who used this technique. The 5 of them believed that it would not take long for the Sea of Blood to collapse. The premise was that they could hold on until then. However, Lu Yi would not give them this chance. If he was alone and used this method to trap the 5 constellation mansions, it would take some effort to get rid of them. Perhaps they would really succeed. However, he was not alone at this moment. Under the cover of the Sea of Blood, Lu Yi knew their positions clearly. He led Chu Shen and Lucky Star through the Sea of Blood, easily finding the enemy's position and getting rid of them one by one. After a while, the Sea of Blood disappeared. Lu Yi and the other 2 stood in the air, their bodies spotless. There were also several figures with weak auras and complicated expressions. Without exception, all of them were seriously injured. The body cultivator who was first killed by Lu Yi was also there. Half of his neck was cut open. Although he had not lost his ability to fight, he did not fight after that, because he could feel that he was still alive because Lu Yi had held back. Lu Yi was a righteous person, and he was not one to pester endlessly. He took a deep look at Lu Yi and cupped his fists. "I've learned." With that, he disappeared. Obviously, he had returned to the Constellation Hall to treat his injuries. "Thank you for showing mercy, fellow Taoist." Another person spoke. It was the sword cultivator who had shouted for help earlier. The remaining people expressed their thanks and left the place. In an instant, the originally chaotic battlefield became clear. End of chapter. Chapter 14:11. The 2 teams of 10 people left the arena. Lu Yi and the other 2 maintained their auras, maintaining their formation. He had already put away his Panshan saber and was wearing a loose robe with large sleeves. Anyone who saw him would praise him as a good spell cultivator. However, who would have thought that it was this guy in standard spell cultivator attire who had just cut down 2 full squads like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves? Chu Shen laughed heartily. "Awesome, this is awesome." In his entire life, he had never fought such a hearty battle. He did not have to worry too much about the whole process. He only had to activate the power of the defensive spiritual treasure. Then he saw one enemy after another die under his blade. In the past, when he fought with others, he mostly relied on the power of his treasure, but Fa Wuzuan relied on his own abilities. That long blade was black and long, and that slash was fast and sharp. It was truly fascinating. He could not help but wonder when he could be as invincible as Fa Wuzuan. If that happened, he would have no regrets even if he died. If it was said that Lu Ye's ability to deal with a late-stage constellation cultivator so easily at the assembly point had shocked him, then this battle had truly opened his eyes. Such a scene was not something that could be seen casually. His background was indeed extraordinary, but it was precisely because of his extraordinary background that he received more protection and care. On the contrary, he had lost some things, and could not experience things that ordinary cultivators could experience. He could not help but sigh. The strong cultivators who were ranked at the top of the leaderboard were indeed terrifying. Fa Wuzuan did not look special, but he was practically a monster. He just did not know how powerful those who were ranked higher than him were. However, he also clearly realized one thing, and that was that Fa Wuzuan was not a good person. He had such a name, dressed as a spell cultivator, and could use spells. It was obvious that he wanted to mislead others. If they really treated him as a spell cultivator, anyone who faced him would be at a disadvantage. Chu Shen felt that he had learned something. If there was another chance like this in the future, he would have to come up with a better name. What domineering side? It was really too low-end, and he would be easily beaten up after feeling happy for a while, Chushen said. Boss, what do we do next? After the battle just now, Chushen was completely convinced. He even changed the way he addressed Lu Yi, revealing a sense of respect and worship. Young people were like this, especially young people like Chushen who had been strictly disciplined. It was very easy for them to be attracted by the strong. If this expert was about the same age as him, then he would be even more convinced. Find someone. Lu Ye's words were concise and comprehensive. 2 complete teams had been eliminated, which meant that this battle was not over yet. This meant that there were still other enemies on the field. Moreover, based on their previous encounters, there were indeed at least 4 teams participating this time. Then what he had to do was very simple. He had to find them and kill them. Furthermore, that team was very likely to be the same as theirs, a disabled team. So far, things had been going smoothly. Just now, when he led Chushen and Lucky Star to attack together, Lu Yi was already mentally prepared for the 2 of them to retreat first if the situation turned bad. After all, they had only met by chance and had only joined forces for a short period of time. It was impossible for them to trust each other too much. Besides, no one knew what kind of ability the other had. If it were other experienced cultivators, it was very likely that they would have taken the initiative to leave the formation. However, Chushen and Lucky Star did not. Instead, they followed behind him without hesitation and maintained the formation to advance. It could be said that they were simple-minded, but it could also be said that they were hopeful. Of course, there was also the factor of Lu Yi quickly defeating a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, which allowed them to roughly see Lu Ye's strength. All in all, being young had its advantages. Perhaps being more naive and trusting of others was not necessarily a bad thing. If Chushen and Lucky Star had left the formation just now, it would not have been easy for Lu Yi to defeat 10 people so quickly by himself. He could only fight in a roundabout way and find opportunities to launch sneak attacks one by one. It would have been impossible for him to charge forward like this. With Chushen and Lucky Star's protection, he could concentrate all his strength on attacking. Therefore, although the enemies were all eliminated by him, the ones who contributed were 3 people. For the next 2 hours, the 3 of them were on the road to find the remaining enemies. Unfortunately, their luck did not seem to be good and they did not find any. Previously, they were able to find those people mainly because they were fighting in full swing, and there were fluctuations of spiritual power, which made it easy for others to detect. However, now there were most likely only 2 disabled teams left on the entire desolate planet. If they did not meet each other, it would be very difficult for them to meet. It was not until 2 hours later that Lu Yi and the other 2 suddenly sensed the location of the disabled team. It was not their own ability, but because the 2 teams had not fought for too long, which triggered the rules of the Constellation Hall. Under the operation of the Constellation Hall's rules, they could roughly detect the enemy's location. Of course, this kind of detection was mutual. At the same time that they detected the enemy's location, the enemy obviously also detected them. The enemy was probably also looking for them. Therefore, the 2 disabled teams changed directions and moved closer to each other. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they finally met. As expected, the other team only had 3 people left. Moreover, their cultivation was the same as theirs. 2 of them were in the mid-stage and 1 was in the early stage. Looking at it this way, the 2 cultivators that Lu Yi and the other 2 killed at the meeting point were from this team. These 3 people had not encountered any enemies since they came in, so they were in a state of idleness and were very anxious. Now that they finally saw people, and their cultivation was not high, they all rushed over as if they had been injected with chicken blood. These 3 people also formed a simple human formation, but it was only a simple cooperation, without the help of a formation. Their thinking was very simple now. No matter how strong the enemy was, they would fight first. Even if they were eliminated, it was better than wandering around here. Moreover, everyone's cultivation was the same, and the number of people was the same. It was hard to say who would be eliminated. Then, the 3 people crashed into Lu Ye's spell storm. Chushen also roared, urging his spirit artifact to display its power. After a while, the spiritual power fluctuations subsided. The three people who rushed over had disappeared, and there were still traces of blood on the ground. Mysterious light fell from the sky, each enveloping the three people. The mysterious light fell from the sky, which meant that this battle was over. There were indeed only 4 teams involved, and no more. Chu Shen and Lucky Star were overjoyed because the rewards they received this time were undoubtedly much more generous than what they had received before. Lu Yi also noticed it. The 3 people gathered together, and it was not easy to refine, so they naturally had to separate and find a secluded place. Separation was imminent, and Chu Shen was a little reluctant. "Boss, leave a note imprint. If there is anything good in the future, just take care of me, hee. Lu Yi took out his note and handed it to him, then took the note he handed over and left their imprints. "I want one too." Lucky Star's soft voice sounded, as if he was a little embarrassed. Lu Yi naturally did not refuse. After a while, Chu Shen and Lucky Star left, no doubt to find a place to refine the mysterious light. Lu Yi urged the power of his talent tree, and after refining for a while, he swallowed the pure energy contained in the mysterious light. He silently estimated that refining the mysterious light this time was almost equivalent to refining nearly 300 spirit jades. Looking at it this way, the number of chips he could accumulate would not be small. As for how much it increased, he did not know for the time being. He would have to return to the Constellation Hall and interact with the ranking to know. Leaving this place, he appeared in Hall 763, and slightly sensed the ranking. Compared to before, Lu Yi found that his chips had increased by a total of 20 points. The harvest was not small, 20 points. If it was the arena battle, he would have to fight 20 matches and eliminate 20 people to get it. This could be said to be the result of a day's battle. But in the battle just now, the number of people he eliminated was obviously less than 20, and those eliminations were not his alone, but shared with Chu Shen and Lucky Star. Looking at it this way, if he obtained victory in this competition, the benefits he obtained were much greater than the arena battle, whether it was the mysterious light reward or the chips he accumulated. Unfortunately, in the Constellation Hall competition, cultivators did not have the right to choose. Whatever the Constellation Hall arranged, the cultivators had to follow. Not in a hurry to set off again, Lu Yi turned and walked towards a direction. In that direction, there was a huge door standing. This door was not the same as the other doors, it was obviously bigger. If cultivators went through the other doors, they would enter the competition grounds and participate in various forms of competition. But if they went through this door, they would enter other numbered halls. As for which hall they would enter, if they did not choose it, it would be randomly arranged. If they chose it, they could enter the hall they wanted to go to. Lu Yi wanted to go to Hall 88. He had long heard that this hall had become a hall for cultivators to trade. There were countless stalls inside, but Lu Yi had never been there, mainly because there was nothing to buy or sell. But it was different now, he needed to buy something, and in large quantities. Fortunately, he had kept the reward he received when he brought Chu Shen back to the Che Lingjia. Otherwise he would not have the capital to do so. His figure passed through the door and he shouted 88, his vision blurred, and he appeared in another hall. Looking up, there was indeed a large number on the dome, 88, 3 simple and unadorned characters. Immediately he heard a loud noise. Looking up, Lu Yi frowned slightly, because there were too many people here. Normally, a hall could accommodate 2,000 people, and it would be considered quite rich. It was not that it could only accommodate 2,000 people, but that cultivators needed more space to move, so as long as there were 2,000 people in a hall, more cultivators would come in, and they would enter other halls. But the number of people in Hall 88 was clearly more than 2,000, it was possible to say that there were 20,000 people. Although the hall was spacious, with more than 20,000 people gathered here, it was naturally not peaceful, especially when the cultivators coming and going were all doing business. You buy and sell, you talk, you communicate with your spiritual sense, and so on. This chapter ends. Chapter 14:12. Although there was no one in charge in the main hall, all the people who set up stalls to do business here silently followed the rules, so although there were many stalls, they were still neat and orderly. There were about 1,000 stalls crisscrossing each other. In front of each stall, cultivators weaved in and out. To be able to own a stall in this main hall, one had to at least have a background in a large domain. It was not that people were not allowed to set up stalls here, but there was a limit to the number of people who set up stalls, so they had long been bought by those with more capital. Louis had heard of such a thing before. It was said that when the Constellation Hall first opened, there were people who came to the 88th main hall and occupied many stalls, specifically waiting for others to buy them, making a fortune. There was no doubt that these people were well informed because when the Constellation Hall opened in the past, the 88th main hall was also used as a place for trading, so some people knew that the stalls here were precious. When Lu Yi heard of this news, it was already too late, otherwise he could also get some soup. There were big and small stalls, but no matter how big a stall was, there were many types of goods sold and in large quantities, so it was naturally impossible to display all of them, so most of the stall owners only displayed things that were more precious, and other goods were not displayed. They only made a jade slip list of the goods and placed it in front of the stall for the passing cultivators to check, and if there was a need, they could discuss with the stall owner. Lu Yi casually strolled around for a while, and found that the most common thing to buy and sell here was all kinds of spirit pills, healing pills, recovery pills, everything. This was normal in the battles in the Constellation Hall. Injuries were common, and injuries naturally had to be treated, and healing pills had to be used to treat injuries. Recovery pills followed the same principle. Although the winner of the battle would be rewarded with mystic light and could easily recover, there were winners and losers, and those who lost the battle did not have the chance to be rewarded with mystic light. They could only rely on themselves to recover. Almost every stall had spirit pills for sale. Lu Yi wanted to buy a lot of things, but they were not precious. He originally thought that he could easily buy them here. Who would have thought that many stalls did not sell them? On second thought, he realized that it was precisely because the things he wanted to buy were not precious that they were hard to find here. Because the goods here were all brought in by cultivators from outside, they would naturally pick those that were easy to sell and expensive to bring in. On the other hand, if it was cheap and not really needed by the Constellation Hall, they would not waste the effort to bring it in. Although it was difficult to find, Lu Yi eventually found it. The quantity of goods was not large, but Lu Yi did not mind. After negotiating with the stall owner, he easily bought it. He continued to shop, wanting to buy more. After spending most of the day, Lu Yi finally felt that it was about time. He had spent about 8,000 spirit jades. One had to know that the things he bought were not very expensive, yet he still spent so many spirit jades on them. From this, one could see how much they were worth. After completing the transaction, Lu Yi immediately left the 88th hall. It was too noisy here, and it was not suitable for what he was going to do next. After entering another hall, Lu Yi found a corner and casually set up a spirit formation to cover a small area around him before sitting down cross-legged. Many people did the same thing as him. Most of them were recovering from their injuries. Even cultivators who did not know the Tao of spirit formations could buy a spirit formation disc to make a simple arrangement. When others passed by, they also tacitly understood not to disturb him. Lu Yi took out some materials he bought from his storage ring and circulated his spirit force to surround and smelt them. He wanted to refine the identical spirit formation disc, but it was not the same as the previous one. He wanted to make some changes to the spirit formation disc. What he wanted to change was not the identical spirit formation disc, which could not be changed for the time being. He mainly wanted to add a restriction lock to the spirit formation disc, just like the restriction locks on storage bags and storage rings. However, it was not the same as ordinary restriction locks. The effect he hoped to achieve was that if someone rashly dismantled the spirit formation disc and pried into its mysteries, it would trigger the restriction lock and cause the identical spirit formation disc to self-destruct. This required the use of the explosive spirit formation disc. This was not difficult. When Lu Yi was still in the 9 provinces, he had such an idea. However, because the identical spirit formation disc was too complicated, even if others dismantled it and pried into its mysteries, it would be difficult for them to refine it in large quantities. Therefore, he did not put it into action. Now, the situation was different. The universe was not the 9 provinces. Here, there was Yu Yao in the sunshine. There were many capable experts. If the cultivators of the 9 provinces could not do it, the experts in the universe might be able to do it. If the spirit formation disk was leaked one day, the major forces would definitely organize people to study it. And in Lu Ye's plan, this day was probably not too far away. Of course, even if it was a sunshine expert, even if they pried into the mysteries of the identical spirit formation disk, it would not be easy for them to refine the spirit formation disk in large quantities. He had the talent tree and could casually construct spirit formation disks. So what if others were sunshine experts? The success rate of constructing such a complicated spirit formation disk would not be too high. However, he still had to be sure. It was for no other reason than to delay the time the major forces had to study the spirit formation disk. While he was studying how to add a restrictive spell to the disk formation, Chu Shen appeared in the hall numbered 1513, looking refreshed and energetic. It took him some time to refine the profound light, but the benefits he gained in this short period of time were many times faster than his normal cultivation. This undoubtedly greatly increased the speed of his cultivation. Chu Shen excitedly picked it up to check. His brows furrowed slightly. There was no other reason. This was a message from his mother. His mother was good at everything, but she was too controlling. Since he was young, she did not allow him to do this or that. He had not been to the Wanxiang Sea since he ascended to the constellation realm. The last time he ran away from home, he wanted to go to the Wanxiang Sea to broaden his horizons. He was a local cultivator of the Wanxiang galaxy. If a local cultivator had not seen the Wanxiang Sea before, wouldn't it be a joke? However, he did not expect to be discovered by a guy on the way, and even be captured. It was really embarrassing. Originally, he was going to be confined for a few years. However, the Constellation Hall had suddenly opened, which gave him the chance to leave the Che-Ling realm. That was because his mother also knew that with such a great opportunity in front of her, it would be too unreasonable if she still tried to stop him. Yu Yao could run amok in the Wanxiang Sea, but not in the Constellation Hall. Everyone who came and went here was at the Constellation realm. With his life-saving methods, as long as he was in the Constellation Hall, no one at the Constellation realm could do anything to him. The message from the note was very simple. It only had one sentence. "My son, how are the results? Are you invincible?" The message came so promptly. It was obvious that his mother had been trying to contact him. However, the note could not send messages when he was fighting. The message could only be sent when he returned to the Constellation Hall. Chu Shen pursed his lips. His mother was treating him like a big shot, a Wuzuan. There was indeed someone who was invincible, but that was not him. He lazily replied, "Looks like my son has gained something. Not bad, not bad." His mother knew him best. If Chu Shen had not gained anything, he definitely would not have spoken in such a tone. Changing the topic, Jiao Yan exhorted, "However, you still need to guard against arrogance and rashness. Keep up the good work." "I know. Mother, you are so long-winded. If you have the time, why don't you go find a man and see if you can get a second chance?" "Little brat, what nonsense are you saying? Come out." "I won't. Come in if you dare. Come out. Come in." The note was silent for a moment before another message came. "If you dare, hide in there for the rest of your life. If you dare to come out, I will capture you and lock you up for 20 years. I will watch you every day. Don't even think about leaving more than 100 feet away from me." Chu Shen could not help but slap his own mouth. He secretly hated himself for having such a cheap mouth. If his mother said it, she would really do it. Being locked up for 20 years and not being able to leave more than 100 feet away. How terrifying was that? He hurriedly sent a message to apologize. However, Jiao Yan was clearly angered by him this time. No matter how sincere his attitude was, she ignored him. Chu Shen had no choice but to say, "By the way, mother, didn't you ask me to keep an eye out for talents to recruit? I found one. That person is called Fa Wuzuan. Although he is only at the mid-stage of the constellation realm, even ordinary late-stage cultivators could not last more than 10 breaths of time against him. His strength is unfathomable. Your son admires him greatly." Jiao Yan was born in Che-Lingjie. She was not only a native cultivator of the Wanxiang galaxy, but also one of the higher-ups of the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. For a colossus like the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce, their thirst for talents was endless. They had always been recruiting outstanding talents from all over. Before Chu Shen entered the Constellation Palace, Jiao Yan had indeed asked him to keep an eye on this matter when he had the time. It was both to find talents and to let Chu Shen see the difference between him and others. If it was an ordinary talent, Jiao Yan would not be too interested. No matter how powerful he was only a Constellation Realm cultivator. In front of her, he was just an ant. However, a mid-stage cultivator defeating a late-stage cultivator in less than 10 breaths of time was a bit incredible. Such a person was usually the elite of the elites that could only be nurtured by a top realm. However, Jiao Yan did not have any recollection of the name Fa Wuzuan. He was not from any top realm. She then sent a message to someone to investigate the situation. After a while, as Chu Shen waited anxiously, the musical note finally responded. The one ranked 13th on the rankings? Chu Shen raised his head to look at the rankings. Indeed, he found Fa Wuzuan's name at 13th. When he first saw Fa Wuzuan, he thought it was someone with the same name. However, after Fa Wuzuan easily defeated a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator, he knew it was not someone with the same name. The Fa Wuzuan in front of him was the one on the rankings. Previously, he was ranked 17th. Now, he was ranked 13th. It was more and more confirmed. Yes, it's him. Are you sure he is only at the mid-stage of the Constellation Realm? Mother, your son fought alongside him this time. I even helped him put in a lot of effort. I definitely didn't misjudge his cultivation. Tell me more. Jiao Yan was interested. End of chapter. Chapter 1413. Chu Shen then told the story of the dispute between the 4 teams on the Desolate Star. The whole process was not complicated, because after he and Lu Yi had gathered, they had encountered a total of 3 battles, and all 3 of them had been won cleanly and cleanly. He was quite eloquent, and the 3 battles were like a picture scroll in front of Jiao Yan's eyes, allowing Jiao Yan to see many details clearly. After Chu Shen finished, he asked again, Mother, this is a good talent, right? Do you need to recruit him? If you do, I can help you. When we parted, I specially exchanged musical note imprints with him. Jiao Yan did not immediately respond, but pondered. Fei Wuzuan, this name sounded like a real name, but also like an alias. However, from Chu Shen's description, one thing was certain, this person was not a Dharma cultivator, but a weapon cultivator disguised as a Dharma cultivator. That was why he was able to show his true abilities when facing more enemies. If Chu Shen did not exaggerate, then this person was indeed a great talent. Even Jiao Yan, who had seen many talents from all sides, could not help but be tempted. However, what Jiao Yan was most concerned about was not the extraordinary strength displayed by this person, but something else. The treasure in his hand can allow the 3 of you to easily connect and form a formation? Yes, that treasure is very powerful. Tell me what the treasure is like. Chu Shen was impressed by Fa Wuzuan's personal strength, and his mind was filled with thoughts of becoming someone like Fa Wuzuan in the future. However, Jiao Yan could see more. With different experiences and standing at different heights, it was natural for one to view things from a different perspective. Chu Shen thought for a moment, then said, It's nothing special, just an ordinary formation disk. You can see it everywhere outside, but its power is very mysterious. When the 3 of us formed a formation, we were able to kill those people without any power to fight back. Right? He said that treasure is called the Twin Chi Linked Branches Formation Disk. Twin Chi Linked Branches. Jiao Yan fell into deep thought. After a long while, she sent another message. Contact him and ask if he is willing to sell that formation disk. If he is willing to sell it, buy it at any price. Chu Shen was slightly stunned. Mother, although that thing is quite mysterious, it seems that the range of its power is limited. At most, it can only support 4 or 5 people to form a formation. Even if it has some value, it's not worth spending a lot of money to buy it, right? Jiao Yan said earnestly, You're still young and haven't come into contact with many things, so you don't understand. If that thing is really just a treasure with mysterious power, then it's fine. But since it's a formation plate, then it means that there are mysterious spirit inscriptions playing a role in it. Those spirit inscriptions are most likely the same spirit inscriptions that he mentioned. I've never heard of or seen these spirit inscriptions before. If you can get that formation plate, dismantle it, and decipher the structure of the spirit inscriptions. Chu Shen immediately reacted, then we can organize people to refine this twin chi connected branch array disk. Juyen said, if this thing can really be refined in batches, it will have a huge impact on the current cultivation system. Therefore, this treasure is extremely valuable, far more valuable than you can imagine. I know, I'll contact him now. Mother, you're so amazing. Chu Shen praised and did not forget to flatter his mother. Jiao Yan did not fall for his trick. If you can redeem yourself this time, I won't care about what you said just now. If you can't, then you can wait for 20 years of confinement. In the 1513 hall, Chu Shen's face was wrinkled like a bitter gourd. After a while, he found Fa Wuzuan's mark in the note and sent out a message. Big brother, are you free? There was no reply. Big brother, I have something to talk to you about. It's a good thing, a very good thing. There was still no reply. Big brother, please do me a favor and save me. I can't live anymore. After sending a few messages, there was still no reply. He guessed that Fa Wuzuan was probably busy with something and did not have time to check the note. So he waited for half a day. When he sent another message, Chu Shen was a little dumbfounded because he could not send it out anymore. This undoubtedly meant that Fa Wuzuan had entered a battle through the door. At this moment, Lu Yi was participating in a battle in the form of an arena battle. Naturally, he had seen the message Chu Shen had sent him. He vaguely knew why Chu Shen was looking for him. The only thing he didn't understand was why Chu Shen looked so miserable. It seemed like he couldn't live anymore. The plan in his mind was going smoothly, but he still needed more time to operate and ferment. This was because only then could he gain more benefits and become a fatty in one bite. However, if he wanted to operate and ferment, he still needed an opportunity, like the opportunity where several teams fought together like before. It was impossible for him to fight a one-on-one battle like he was doing right now. Spiritual jades were the key to cultivation in the starry sky. With spiritual jades, everything was easy. Without spiritual jades, it was difficult to move an inch. It was the same logic as mortals who had money or not. However, what he lacked was spiritual jades. In the past, when he could still fish, he could still rely on the high-value whitey spirit to satisfy his cultivation needs. Furthermore, the efficiency of his cultivation in the depths of the Wanxiang Sea far exceeded that of ordinary cultivation methods. The time when he fished with Pu Ku was the time when his cultivation grew the fastest. However, with the sudden arrival of Yujichi, this way of making money was cut off. It was also unrealistic to go to Recruitment Island. The only time he experienced it was when he was tricked by Zhu Yuan to go to a desolate star. If he had not met Ma Bin but Ri Ri, who harbored ill intentions towards him, he would have been buried long ago. Therefore, since then, Lu Yi had been looking for a suitable way to make money. After deducing the Holy Guardian Spirit rune, the reason why he chose the Spirit and Branch Spirit rune was partly because he was considering the 9 states, and partly because Lu Yi wanted to make money for himself. The new Spirit and Branch Spirit rune were successfully deduced, and the refining of the new formation disk was also extremely simple. Lu Yi could sense that once this thing was leaked, it would definitely attract the attention of various forces. However, a man's wealth was his own ruin. If he really rashly threw out the formation disk, it would only bring him a huge risk. How to safely push it out and how to make money while ensuring his own safety were all problems he needed to consider. He had thought about whether he should reach a cooperative relationship with the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. He would refine it himself, give it to them to sell, and then split the money. He had the 1,000 Faces and the Imitation Might Spirit rune, so it would not be a problem to disguise himself. However, he only had the constellation. Behind the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce was Ri Ri. If he was really targeted by Ri Ri, even if he had the 1,000 Faces and the Imitation Might Spirit rune, he might not be able to deceive them. At that time, he would still be in a bad situation. Lu Yi was not going to entrust his safety to someone else's mercy. It was not until the sudden appearance of the Constellation Hall that he saw a good opportunity. Therefore, when he entered the Constellation Hall to leave his name, he decisively gave himself an alias and changed his appearance and attire. At this point, the opportunity was there. He only needed to wait quietly for the opportunity. The battle that he had experienced with Chu Shen was an excellent opportunity. Therefore, he did not hesitate to take out the Spirit and Branch Spirit Rune Formation Disc and led Chu Shen and Lucky Star to kill in all directions. If it were not for the Formation Disc appearing more often, he would not have to go through so much trouble. It was difficult to act alone, but as long as the enemies he encountered were not at the level of Wei Yijin, he might be able to succeed. At most, he would need to spend more time and energy. Now that Chu Shen contacted him, it was obvious that he realized the great value of the Formation Disc. However, Lu Yi did not plan to sell it at this time, even if he had already added a restriction lock on the Formation Disc. Because no matter how great the value of a Formation Disc was, it was still limited. What Lu Yi wanted to sell was not just a Formation Disc, he wanted to sell a lot. He had a premonition that this was not a long-term business. Since it could not be long-term, then he would do his best to gather as much wealth as possible in the shortest amount of time. Moreover, if he only sold one, he would definitely offend the buyer. This was because this thing was not unique and could be casually refined. If the buyer bought it and found that someone else had it, they would definitely think that they had been cheated. If they sold a lot of them and allowed all the major forces to buy them, then no one would feel that they had been cheated. This could be considered a way to share the risk, to ensure their own safety as much as possible, and to reduce their own influence on this matter. As for what kind of impact the sale of so many formation discs would have on the existing cultivation system, it was not something that Lu Yi needed to worry about. The world of cultivators had existed for so many years, and there were always some new things that would trigger changes in the entire world of cultivators. However, the world of cultivators, as a special group, was very adaptable. The existing system might have some changes because of this, but it would never be destroyed. No matter what, for Lu Yi, making money was the most important thing. Everything else was fleeting. And if he wanted to make the Formation Disc famous as soon as possible, he naturally needed more opportunities to display it. Therefore, in the following period of time, Lu Yi would refine a Formation Disc after every competition. In order to increase the efficiency of refining, he even condensed a doppelganger each time, his main body and doppelganger going into battle together. When he was in the Divine Sea, he could refine a lot of Formation Discs in a day. Now that his cultivation had reached the middle stage of the Constellation Realm, his efficiency was many times higher than before. Before long, he could easily refine 100 or 200 formation discs. Then, he would step through the door and enter the competition grounds. Most of the battles he encountered were still one-on-one battles in the arena. There were only a few battles where he teamed up with a different number of companions. Every time he encountered a situation like this, Lu Yi would immediately take out the formation disc and explain its uses to his temporary companions, letting them feel the power of the formation disc. He was like a peddler trying to sell his goods. If it were other middle-stage Constellation Realm cultivators, they might not have the right to speak like this. This was because in every competition, there would be a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator as a teammate. Their cultivation was higher, so they naturally had to be the leader. However, Fa Wuzuan's name was still on the rankings after all. He was ranked very high, so people had to pay attention to him. After a few times, although the Twin Chi formation disc had gained a bit of fame, it was only circulated in a small circle. It was far from Lu Ye's expectations. End of chapter. Chapter 14:14. Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry. He was waiting for a good opportunity, because according to the information he received before, there was a good opportunity to display the Twin Chi connected branch formation disc. However, whether he could grasp this opportunity or not still depended on his luck. Time passed, but he didn't stop his various operations. He had been refining formation discs in between participating in the competition, accumulating the number. On the ranking board, his ranking had long fallen out of the top 300, it couldn't be helped. Other people who were ranked at the top were seizing the opportunity to participate in the competition, but he spent a lot of time refining formation discs. Naturally, the number of chips he accumulated was slowly surpassed by others. But even if it was a ranking outside of the top 300, it was still a very high position. During this period, there were already many forces inquiring about him, passing on messages to him, wanting to recruit him. Without exception, Lu Yi rejected them all. What he wanted to do was too big. If he was recruited at this time, no matter how good the treatment was, it wasn't enough to move him. After parting with Chu Shun for a month, the opportunity Lu Yi had been waiting for finally came. On this day, he had just returned from a competition and saw many people gathered in front of the ranking board. He originally thought that there would be some big changes on the ranking board, but after taking a closer look, he realized that wasn't the case. Because these people weren't gathered at the front of the ranking board, but at the back of the ranking board. All this time, the ranking board only appeared on the front, and the back was blank, nothing at all. Now that so many people were gathered there, obviously something had happened. Lu Ye's heart stirred and he faintly guessed. When he came to the back of the ranking board, he found that it was as he guessed. On the back of the ranking board, there were 5 large words: 10,000 Battle Royale. The so-called 10,000 Battle Royale could be considered as a form of the Constellation Hall contest. However, it was different from the one Lu Yi had encountered before. There were many people participating in this form. There were at least 10,000 people, and there was no upper limit. It was said that the largest number of people in history was as high as 50,000 people. 50,000 people, and all of them were from the Constellation Hall. That scene was really like a group of demons dancing wildly, extremely chaotic, and the casualty rate was also extremely high. Basically, every time the Constellation Hall opened, there would be at least one 10,000 Battle Royale. As for when it opened, the time wasn't fixed. Cultivators participating in the contest of the Constellation Hall did not have much autonomy. They entered the contest of the Constellation Hall through the door and met whatever they encountered. The only thing they had a bit of autonomy was the chaotic assembly of 10,000. This was because if a cultivator wanted to participate in this matter, they had to register first. Only those who were chosen by the Constellation Hall would have the right to enter. If they were not chosen, then they would never be able to enter. There were no clear rules in the chaotic battle assembly. These things were discovered by the cultivators who had participated in the chaotic battle assembly in the past. At this moment, many cultivators had left their aura imprints on the back of the ranking board. This was the registration stage. Lu Yi also found an opportunity to leave his aura imprint on it. As for whether or not he would be selected, he couldn't guarantee it. Every time there was a 10,000-person chaotic assembly, there would be a large number of people who signed up to participate. There would be at least a few 100,000 people. Among them, at least 10,000 people would be selected, and at most 50,000 people would be selected. The probability wasn't high. Instead of participating in the battle, he walked to a corner and set up a formation to refine a formation disc, then waited quietly. Because the chaotic assembly of 10,000 was very efficient, the registration stage only lasted for a day. After a day, the results would be out. Then, the cultivators would be given half a day to prepare before it truly began. A day later, the list of participants for the chaotic assembly of 10,000 was out. Lu Yi was slightly disappointed. He wasn't selected. If he wasn't selected, he wouldn't be able to participate. If he couldn't participate, he wouldn't have the chance to display the twin spirit-connected formation disc on such a big stage. This was unacceptable. He had waited for such a long time for this opportunity. Moreover, after this time, he might not have such a good opportunity again. After thinking for a bit, he took out a sound talisman and sent a message. "Did you get it?" The sound talisman quickly responded, slightly excited, "Boss, you're finally willing to talk to me. I didn't offend you. Why are you ignoring me? Stop talking nonsense." Chu Shin quickly responded, I got it. Boss, do you want to participate too? When the time comes, let's join hands again and kill everyone." Lu Yi looked up at the dome and sent a message. "Come to the 485th hall. I'll be right there." A moment later, Lu Yi, who was sitting in the middle of the formation, saw Chu Shin looking around. He opened the formation and waved at him. Chu Shen ran over with a smile on his face. "Boss, I haven't seen you for a month. I've missed you." Lu Yi looked at him with a calm expression. "I want your participation qualification." The qualification to participate in the chaotic assembly of 10,000 could be transferred. There would always be some cultivators who were selected but couldn't participate due to various reasons. Therefore, as long as the cultivator was willing, the qualification could be transferred. When the time came, he just needed to let the Constellation Hall bear witness. The smile on Chu Shen's face immediately stiffened, and he was a little embarrassed. "Boss, this isn't good." He was selected by luck. Moreover, for Chu Shen, he naturally didn't want to miss such a big event. Therefore, even if he had a request, he didn't want to agree to it. "Then help me find a spot." Lu Yi was already prepared. He didn't know many people here, but Chu Shen was different. He was the young master of the chariot world, the precious son of a sunshine powerhouse. It was naturally easy for him to find a spot. "I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee this." Before Chu Shen could finish his words, he saw a kindred spirit array disc appear in Lu Ye's hand. His eyes immediately widened. After hearing his mother's explanation, how could he not know the value of this item? He had been trying to contact Lu Yi for the past month because of this array disc. "After the matter is settled, I'll give this to you." Chu Shen was stunned for a moment, then he patted his chest. "Leave this to me." Lu Yi nodded. Under Chu Shen's reluctant gaze, he kept the array disc. Without further ado, Chu Shen immediately took out a sound talisman and began to send a message to the outside world. Obviously, he was going to ask Juyen for help. It wasn't easy for him to ask others to give up their participation qualification. Juyen's words were the most effective. While he was busy here, Lu Yi had already arrived at the 88th hall. He wanted to buy a long saber. In all the previous events, it wasn't a big deal to use his mountain pan saber. There were many weapon cultivators in the world, and there were many who used sabers. The mountain pan saber's appearance wasn't strange and could be considered very ordinary. So even if he fought with the mountain pan saber, it wouldn't be a big deal as long as he didn't leave behind any images. However, the chaotic assembly this time was different. When the time came, the Constellation Hall would show the scene of the chaotic assembly. In other words, the cultivators who stayed in the various halls could immerse themselves in their thoughts and observe the various situations of the chaotic assembly. Under the gaze of millions of people, he didn't want to expose anything related to himself. Finding a replacement saber was very important. Even if it would affect his ability to display his strength, he didn't care. In the 88th hall, Lu Yi searched in front of the various stalls. It didn't take him too long to find a suitable saber. Its appearance was very similar to the mountain pan saber. This was necessary because if the appearance was different, it would greatly affect his ability to display his strength. It was lighter than the mountain pan saber, but this couldn't be helped. When Lu Yi forged his own mountain pan saber, he intentionally added some materials to increase its weight. This saber named Crimson Dragon met Lu Ye's requirements as a whole. Moreover, the entire saber gave off a blood-red glow, which was very eye-catching. The quality was also quite good. It could be considered a supreme-grade spirit treasure. After haggling with the stall owner, Lu Yi bought it for nearly 7,000 spirit jades. This price was quite expensive because ordinary spirit treasures only cost around 2,000 to 3,000 spirit jades. The better ones only cost a bit more than 5,000 spirit jades. 7,000 spirit jades was undoubtedly a bit more expensive. This was because its quality wasn't bad, but also because it was sold in the Constellation Hall. Lu Yi estimated that if he really bought a spirit treasure like this in the Wanxiang Sea, it would only cost around 5,000 to 6,000 spirit jades. However, for what he was about to do, now wasn't the time to haggle over such trivial matters. After he bought the Crimson Dragon, Chu Shen had already sent him a message, telling him that everything was done and that they were only waiting for the chaotic assembly to begin. Chu Shen's efficiency was quite high. Come to think of it, he had been trying to contact Lu Yi all this time for the sake of the formation plate. Now that he had gotten one for free, he would naturally do his best. When Lu Yi returned to his original hall number 485, he saw a young man standing beside Chu Shen. This person was undoubtedly qualified to enter the chaotic assembly and had been chosen to give it to Lu Yi. When they met and greeted each other, the young man's attitude was very respectful. He had probably received Zhou Yan's instructions. "Boss, I found him." "That thing?" Chu Shen stammered. He had promised Zhou Yan that he would get it. If Lu Yi went back on his word, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. "I won't shortchange you. When I come back, I'll give it to you," Chu Shen muttered to himself. The chaotic assembly was chaotic and everyone was fighting for supremacy. Fa Wuzuan really did need the formation plate. When the time came, Chu Shen would follow him. With the help of the formation plate, he wouldn't force it. Moreover, he was confident that Fa Wuzuan wouldn't lie to him about this. Half a day later, Chu Shen's expression became serious. "It's begun." As his voice rang out, the void in front of him distorted and turned into a small door. At the same time, a small door also appeared in front of the young man. Not only were the two of them like this, but several other people in the hall were also like this. These people were undoubtedly qualified to participate in the chaotic assembly. Through this small door, cultivators could enter the chaotic assembly. The transfer of qualifications also needed to take place at this time. Lu Yi walked towards the door in front of the young man, but just as he was about to enter, he encountered a huge obstruction and couldn't move forward. The young man looked at Chu Shen, who nodded at him. Only then did the young man's heart move. The power that was blocking Lu Ye's path suddenly disappeared without a trace. The moment before his figure disappeared, Chu Shen's voice rang out. "Boss, go in and contact them. I'm coming to find you." End of chapter. Chapter 14-15. After a brief moment of absent-mindedness, when his vision returned to normal, he found himself in a starry sky. This was to be expected. Lu Yi didn't know how many star mansions were participating in this battle royale, but with a lineup of at least 10,000 people, a single desolate star or dead star would be too small to allow cultivators to display their abilities. So, basically, every battle royale's venue was a large starry sky. Only such a vast space could allow the numerous star mansions to display their abilities. As soon as he appeared, Lu Yi felt something rapidly approaching him and instinctively leapt to the side to avoid it. At the same time, he spread out his divine sense to investigate his surroundings. What was coming towards him was not a cultivator, but a huge meteorite at an extremely fast speed. Given the size and speed of this meteorite, if Lu Yi failed to avoid it, he would likely be seriously injured in an instant. As soon as he dodged one meteorite, another came flying towards him. Only then did Lu Yi see that he was in a high-speed meteorite belt. He was not the only one who appeared in the range of this meteorite belt, as there were two other cultivators as well. While Lu Yi was dodging the meteorites, one of the contestants had already been eliminated. This contestant's reaction was a little slow, and he was hit by a large meteorite. He instantly spat out a mouthful of blood and his aura withered. Suffering such a heavy injury as soon as he entered the arena, he was undoubtedly powerless to continue. Especially after his aura weakened, Lu Yi and the other person's aura instantly locked onto him. When this person was eliminated and his figure disappeared, Lu Yi was already standing on a meteorite, moving forward with it at high speed. Being in a meteorite belt like this, if it was difficult to avoid, this was undoubtedly the best way to deal with it. Lu Yi wasn't trying to avoid the meteorites, but he wanted to take the opportunity to investigate the situation. At the very least, he wanted to understand what kind of starry sky this was and how many people were around. However, his approach was obviously misunderstood by the other person. While this person was dodging the meteorites, he constantly approached Lu Yi. His intentions were self-evident. The newcomer was not from the human race. His entire body was covered in flames. He was from the flame race. Lu Yi had interacted with the cultivators of the Yen clan in the alpha origin stage of the reincarnation tree and knew that they were natural law cultivators. However, not every Yen clan member was a law cultivator. A small number of them walked the path of body cultivators. They had special constitutions and their bodies contained extremely violent and scorching power. They were very advantageous in both long-range attacks and close combat. The Yen clan's malice was self-evident, and they relied on nothing more than their late-stage star constellation cultivation. Lu Yi raised his hand and shot several fire dragons at the Flame Tribe member. The Flame Tribe member didn't even try to dodge. He allowed the fire dragons to slam into his body, causing sparks to fly everywhere. However, his body wasn't affected at all. He sneered, "You dare to play with fire spells in front of my Flame Clan? Brat, I'm afraid you haven't woken up yet. If you know what's good for you, you'd back off and you'll suffer less." The Yen clan's special constitutions made them extremely resistant to most fire spells in the world. If a law cultivator who only knew how to use fire spells encountered a Flame Tribe member, they could only wait for death. However, this was still a battle in the Constellation Hall. If one admitted defeat, they could still admit defeat and withdraw. This could also be considered a victory for the Yen clan. After this chaotic battle was over, it would increase the number of chips they had accumulated. Lu Yi turned a deaf ear to his words and unhurriedly continued to cast his spells. There was no doubt that his spells were unable to obstruct the incoming Yen clan member. Moments later, the Yen clan member arrived in front of Lu Yi. He was also a cautious person and didn't rashly approach. Instead, he retaliated with his own spells. It had to be said that even though the Yen clan was a body cultivator, their mastery of fire spells surpassed that of ordinary law cultivators. Their spells intertwined, creating an extremely lively battle. For a time, neither side was able to do anything to the other. The Yen clan member couldn't take it anymore and once again charged at Lu Yi. If his spells couldn't deal with his opponent, then he would fight in close combat. Then he saw the corners of Lu Yi's mouth curl up slightly, but it also didn't seem to be. When he broke through the blockade of spells and arrived in front of Lu Yi, a long saber suddenly cut through the void. There was no suspense about what happened next. With Lu Yi's current strength, unless he encountered a peak Constellation Hall master like Wei Yijian, ordinary late Constellation Hall masters wouldn't be able to last long against him. By the time the Yen clan member cried out in shock and admitted defeat, he was already heavily injured. The Yen clan member's figure disappeared and Lu Yi put away his crimson dragon. Only then did he have the time to examine his surroundings. In the distance, a great sun hung high in the sky. However, this sun was different from the ones Lu Yi had seen before. Its light was dim and gave off a feeling that it was past its prime, as if it was approaching its end. Moreover, there were many clearly visible black spots in the sun. There were many stars in the surroundings, and one of them was particularly large. What was even more spectacular was that outside this enormous star, there was a dazzling and colorful ring of stars, as if this star was wearing a layer of outer clothing. In the perception of his divine sense, there were sounds of cultivators fighting in all directions. From time to time, there would be cultivators whose auras weakened or even disappeared. Clearly, these were all cultivators who came here and fought after seeing each other. Lu Yi heard a sound coming from the sound talisman. He took it out to investigate. As expected, it was a message from Chu Shen. "Boss, where are you? It's so dangerous here, there are people everywhere." Lu Yi thought for a moment and replied, "Do you see the largest star with the 5-colored ring?" Chu Shen replied, "I see it. Go over there and wait for me. Once you're well hidden, I'll come find you." "Understood." Chu Shen replied happily. With the experience of teaming up with Lu Yi to kill enemies, he naturally understood that as long as he followed Lu Yi this time, he wouldn't dare to say that he would win in the end, but at the very least, his gains wouldn't be too small. If he was lucky, he might be able to eliminate everyone. He had to cling onto this thigh tightly and not let go. Lu Yi leaped out of the asteroid belt and flew towards the largest star. He didn't use his planetary boat. In such a chaotic place, there were all kinds of people everywhere. Moreover, there were many asteroids, so it wasn't suitable for him to use his planetary boat. Although flying like this would slow him down a little, it would be better for him to deal with unexpected situations. The Kindred Spirit Binding Formation Disc he had refined now could be used by about 5 people in a formation. Any more and he wouldn't be able to use it. According to his plan, he had to find a few temporary companions for this trip. In the Battle Royale, one could fight alone or form temporary alliances. It all depended on the cultivator's own wishes. The rules of the Constellation Hall wouldn't stop them. Chu Shen was one, so he still needed 3 more people. Moreover, in order to better display the power of the formation disc, the lower the cultivation of the temporary companions he chose, the better. With a plan in mind, Lu Yi continued to search for suitable targets as he traveled. After traveling for a short while, he heard someone shouting from not far away, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Lu Yi stopped and turned around, only to see a lone figure standing on top of a meteorite. The figure had a large, tattooed arm, and Lu Yi couldn't tell if it was a tattoo or a tattoo. Lu Yi guessed that it was most likely the latter. Cultivators rarely tattooed themselves with meaningless things. Judging from his attire, he was probably an individual cultivator. Moreover, judging from the fluctuations of spiritual power around him, he was at least at the late stage of the constellation realm. Lu Yi looked at him calmly. The tattooed man said, "Fellow Taoist, since you're also alone, why don't we work together?" Although cultivators all had their own social circles, and if they had friends who came in together, they could naturally contact each other and work together. However, there were always some who came in alone, and there was no one they could trust here. In such a chaotic place, it wasn't safe to be alone, even if one was at the late stage. The tattooed man was probably such a person. That was why he called out to Lu Yi and wanted to work together with him. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. "No." The tattooed man said, "Fellow Taoist, are you going to meet up with your companions?" "That's fine. Fellow Taoist should be able to tell that I'm a body cultivator. If fellow Taoist doesn't mind, I can charge and break through the enemy lines for you." Lu Yi still shook his head. "Thank you for your kind intentions, but there's no need." The tattooed man understood and didn't force him. However, he still didn't give up and asked, "Can you tell me the reason?" Lu Yi looked him up and down. "Your cultivation is too high." He flashed and continued forward. The tattooed man was left with a blank expression. What kind of bullshit reason was this? Wasn't having a high cultivation a good thing? Since when did it become a reason to be rejected? He really couldn't see through the ways of the world. However, a late-stage body cultivator like him was still very popular. Even if Lu Yi didn't agree, he would still find someone who would accept him as long as he looked around. There was no conflict between them, and the tattooed man didn't have the intention to bully the weak. Lu Yi naturally wouldn't make the situation too ugly. Along the way, he looked around. Lu Yi soon discovered something that gave him a headache. In this chaotic meeting, there were very few cultivators at the early stage of the Constellation Palace. He didn't find a single one along the way. The cultivators he encountered were either at the middle stage or the late stage. This was obviously not the result of the Constellation Palace's deliberate choice, but among the cultivators who signed up for the battle, the number of early-stage cultivators was small to begin with. Of course, in such a chaotic place, early-stage cultivators were still weak. It could be said that 90% of early-stage cultivators weren't willing to participate in such a thing, lest they become the other party's trump card. At the same time, it was accompanied by the risk of losing their lives. But in this way, it wasn't easy for Lu Yi to find enough temporary allies to meet his requirements. It made Chu Shen even more precious. Lu Yi wanted to rush to Chu Shen's side as soon as possible, but reality wasn't satisfactory. Because along the way, there were always people jumping out to intercept him and attack him. Before he reached the periphery of the huge star with the star ring, Lu Yi encountered more than a dozen battles of various sizes. His gains were not small, but his journey was seriously hindered. With great difficulty, he broke through the layers of interception and arrived at the periphery of the star. Then, there was movement from the sound talisman again. Lu Yi checked, and Chu Shen's shout immediately came from inside. "Boss, save me. I've been discovered. Several people are chasing me." End of chapter. Chapter 14-16. Chu Shen's cultivation was not high, but with his skills, even if he met someone stronger than him, he would still be able to fight back. However, he was currently being beaten up, and the situation was not good. "Hold on." Lu Yi hurriedly replied. "I'm holding on, they can't run as fast as me." "Oh no, there's someone blocking me." Lu Yi did not reply, but looked up. He had to find Chu Shen's position as soon as possible, and he could not let anything happen to such a natural ally. However, as far as the eye could see, there were more than 10 battlefields in the huge star ring. Spiritual energy surged, and colorful lights bloomed, fighting in full swing. He was a little far away, and could not see clearly where Chu Shen was fighting. His figure continued to move forward. From afar, the star ring looked like a huge planet, but in reality, it was a meteorite belt. However, it was different from the meteorite belt Lu Yi encountered before. It was a meteorite belt that surrounded the planet, with countless meteorites of various sizes following a certain pattern, moving around the planet in a cycle that would never stop. Lu Yi did not enter the star ring, but quickly passed by it. Finally, he felt Chu Shen's aura from afar, and saw Chu Shen's difficult situation. On the other side, Chu Shen was awkwardly hiding under the protection of a defensive spiritual treasure, surrounded by 4 figures. Under various attacks, the spiritual treasure's light was extremely dim. Among the 4, 3 of them were merciless. Only a woman stood still, as if she could not bear to see Chu Shen suffer. Lu Yi heard her from afar, advising Chu Shen, "Hurry up and leave. If the spiritual treasure's power disappears, you'll be beaten to death, and then you'll die a horrible death." Chu Shen was still urging his spiritual energy to hold on, and at the same time he shouted, "My big brother Fa Wuzuan will be here soon. If you know what's good for you, stop right now, or else when he's here, none of you will be able to escape." It would have been better if he did not say that, but once he said that, the 3 cultivators' attacks became even fiercer. They were all in the constellation realm, who would be so easily threatened. At this moment, the sound of a saber rang through the void, and the sound came from afar. This was undoubtedly a warning. Chu Shen turned around and was instantly overjoyed. "My big brother is here, you're all finished. Quickly finish him off." Among the 3 people who were attacking Chu Shen, a late-stage star constellation realm cultivator yelled out. Even though he wasn't threatened by Chu Shen's words, he naturally had to quickly finish off one of them before he had the energy to deal with the second one. An early-stage constellation realm cultivator actually made them waste so much time. This middle-stage constellation realm cultivator was probably not to be trifled with. If it was really Fa Wuzuan, who was on the ranking board, then he was a great enemy. Following the command of this late Xingxiu, Chu Shen's already shaky defense was finally on the verge of shattering. He looked in Lu Yelai's direction with a face full of indignation. He roared, "Boss, take revenge." As soon as he finished speaking, he took the initiative to leave. He had no choice but to retreat. Lu Yi still needed at least 5 breaths of time to reach the battlefield, but he couldn't even last 3 breaths of time. Once his defenses were broken, his life would truly be in danger. His heart was filled with unwillingness. He was so close. Along with the disappearance of Chu Shen's figure, the 3 people who made a move turned around in unison, and under the lead of the late-stage star constellation, they went to meet Lu Yi. The woman who persuaded Chu Shen just now was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly followed. After a few breaths of time, violent spirit energies suddenly collided together, and there was a faint flash of blade light. Lu Ye's figure was like an awl, piercing through the opponent's formation. At the back of the team, the woman didn't see clearly what happened, but she suddenly felt a warm feeling on her face. She instinctively raised her hand to wipe it, and her hand was full of sticky warmth. Her expression suddenly became horrified, because she realized what this sticky warmth was. Looking around, she saw that one of her 3 companions had already died on the spot, and the other had his hand on his chest, and his figure was gradually fading. It was obvious that he had taken the initiative to retreat, but she still saw the tragic injury on his chest. Only the late-stage constellation realm cultivator was still in good condition, but as his figure flew, there was also blood flying out from his body, and it was obvious that he was injured. The next moment, the woman felt a chill on her neck, and her whole body froze. She clearly felt a sharp blade on her neck, and the spirit energy on the blade was swallowing and spitting. If she dared to make any strange movements, she would definitely lose her head. In her horror, she didn't even dare to shout the word, "Admit defeat." A voice sounded by her ear, "You're not in the same group?" The reason why she had such doubts was because her side had already taken down the woman, but the late-stage constellation realm cultivator actually ran forward without looking back, as if he didn't care about the woman's life or death. It was obvious that the moment of confrontation just now made him realize the terror of Lu Ye's strength. At this moment, he only had thoughts of quickly escaping this place. No, it's also true. We formed a temporary alliance, and we're not familiar with each other, the woman stammered nervously. In this chaotic meeting, such temporary alliances were not rare, and this was also the reason why the late-stage constellation realm cultivator didn't care about the woman's life or death. The enemy was strong, and it wasn't worth it to lose his life for an unfamiliar woman. Stay here and don't move, Lu Yi ordered and chased after him in a flash. The cold feeling on her neck disappeared, and the woman's stiff body suddenly relaxed. She let out a long breath, and her high chest contracted slightly. There was no one around. Should she run? Or should she just leave this place? After hesitating for a moment, before she could make up her mind, a figure suddenly appeared beside her. It was the young man from before. The woman jumped in fright, and her face turned pale. Lu Yi put away the imperial tool he left here and glanced at her indifferently. You're quite honest. He didn't expect that when he told this woman to stay here and not move, she really would stand here without moving. He thought she would take the opportunity to escape. The woman blushed. I'm afraid you'll chase after me when you go out. This was also the reason why she was conflicted. Her appearance had already been exposed, and if she didn't listen to him obediently, she would be hunted down by someone who held a grudge, and her future days wouldn't be easy. Of course, the reason why Lu Yi didn't give her a dangerous feeling was because Lu Yi had a chance to take her life just now, but he didn't. This made the woman feel that Lu Yi didn't seem to be an unreasonable person. My companion was chased away by you, so tell me what to do. Lu Yi raised his hand and summoned the corpse of the man who was killed just now, and put away his storage ring as he asked expressionlessly. The woman hurriedly waved her hand. I didn't hit your companion. Lu Yi took out a piece of cloth and wiped the blood on the scarlet dragon, as if he was wiping away his evil. I know, otherwise you wouldn't still be standing here. Just now when Lu Yi was rushing over, the woman indeed didn't make a move against Chu Shen, and instead advised him to leave early. But Lu Yi changed the topic and looked up at her. He was indeed chased away by you all, and that's my precious and rare companion. Tell me, how should I compensate him? Perhaps the aggression in Lu Ye's eyes caused the woman to misunderstand. Her face became fearful and uneasy, and her expression began to become uneasy. But for some reason, she looked at Lu Yi carefully again, then lowered her head and said in a low voice. What? Lu Yi didn't hear clearly. I can only compensate with my body. The woman was about to cry. I don't have any spirit jades, and I don't have any good things. I just advanced to a constellation not long ago, and the realm I came from isn't strong. Lu Yi couldn't help but pause in the middle of wiping his saber, and seeing that the woman was still chattering away, he couldn't help but scold, Shut up. The woman hurriedly closed her mouth and looked at him with a sad expression, as if she was waiting for the judgment of fate. Lu Yi said, Since you chased away my companion, then you can be my companion. The woman was stunned, thinking that she had misheard. You're not willing? Lu Yi raised the scarlet dragon in his hand, and the blood-red color made it look like it had never been wiped before. I'm willing. The woman nodded her head like a chicken pecking at rice. Only then did Lu Yi sheath his saber. Good, then from now until the end of the chaotic assembly, we are allies. I only have one request, and that is to follow my orders, understood? Understood. Let's go. Lu Yi called out and took the lead to fly forward. The woman hurriedly followed, blindly following him. After flying for a short distance, the woman couldn't suppress her curiosity. Are you really Fa Wuzuan? The Fa Wuzuan on the chip's ranking? Chu Xin had mentioned Fa Wuzuan's name before, and the woman had clearly seen the chip's ranking. Although Fa Wuzuan's ranking had fallen out of the top 300 a month ago, his name had occupied the top 20 for a long time, and his reputation had been awe-inspiring. It could be said that anyone who paid attention to the chip's ranking would know who Fa Wuzuan was. But isn't Fa Wuzuan a magic cultivator? I see that you're also a magic cultivator, so why do you use a saber? As she asked this, an expression of sudden realization appeared on the woman's face. I understand now, your name is fake. You use this name to make everyone think that you're a magic cultivator, but when you really fight, you can suddenly draw your saber and catch them off guard. No wonder you're ranked so high in the intermediate stage. It seems that many people. As she spoke, she didn't dare to continue, because Lu Yi was staring at her expressionlessly. The woman shrunk her neck, and a timid expression appeared on her face. There's a fight up ahead. The woman tried to change the topic. Lu Yi had already sensed it, and led the woman in that direction. He still had to hurry and find a few more allies. When they arrived, they discovered that 2 intermediate stage constellation cultivators were fighting fiercely. Take this. Lu Yi took out an imperial tool and handed it to the woman. Stand there and don't move. The woman obediently took it and didn't ask why. Then, she saw Lu Yi aggressively charge over there, and saw the 2 intermediate stage constellation cultivators in the middle of a fierce battle being easily harvested by Lu Yi as if they were 2 straws. For a moment, she was fascinated, secretly thinking that it would be great if she could also have such strength. Chapter 14-17. Over the next period of time, the woman witnessed the terrifying strength of a powerhouse on the rankings. Along the way, she encountered more than a dozen battles. No matter how many enemies there were or how high their cultivation was, they couldn't even withstand a single blow from Fa Wuzuan. All she had to do was hide outside the battlefield and wait quietly. She really couldn't understand why Fa Wuzuan wanted her to be his companion if he was so strong. She clearly couldn't do anything. It didn't make sense to say that Fa Wuzuan had bad intentions towards her because he didn't reveal any intentions. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't think of a reason. However, this situation was undoubtedly extremely beneficial to her. Originally, she didn't expect to achieve anything by participating in this chaotic battle. She only wanted to join in on the fun and broaden her horizons. Now that she had the chance to follow such a powerhouse by her side, it didn't seem too bad. Another battle ended. Lu Yi frowned and flew back with his saber. The woman looked nervous because she could see that Lu Yi was in a bad mood. She didn't dare to speak, mainly because she was afraid of being scolded. Lu Yi was indeed in a bad mood because after half a day, he hadn't found a single companion who met the requirements. There weren't many people participating in the chaotic battle in the early stages, but it shouldn't have been so few. Lu Yi reckoned that some of the constellations had already been eliminated in the early stages, and the rest were mostly hiding and changing their positions. If he wasn't strong enough, he would definitely find a way to hide as well. This was because there was a rule in this chaotic battle, and that was that the longer one lasted, the greater the benefits one would reap. It could even be said that even if one didn't achieve anything, one would still achieve something. So, it didn't matter if you weren't strong enough. As long as you knew how to hide, it was fine. This was also why the early stages of the early stages were willing to sign up. But for him, it was difficult to find people who met the requirements in such a vast expanse of the starry sky. If you were alone, what would you do? Lu Yi suddenly asked. He couldn't find the early stages of the constellation realm, nor did he know where they were hiding. This was because he stood at a different height and position. This temporary companion who looked dull was an early-stage constellation realm cultivator. Perhaps standing in her point of view was the solution. I don't know. The woman's answer wasn't constructive at all. Lu Yi stared at her deeply. Sensing Lu Ye's dissatisfaction, the woman pulled a long face. I really didn't know I was with you. Lu Yi fell silent and said, You're alone now, think of a way to survive. With that, he flew off into the distance. The woman was stunned for a moment. She instinctively wanted to chase after him, but on second thought, she didn't move. After all, Lu Yi had made it very clear that he despised her and abandoned her. Grievance welled up in his heart, and he couldn't help but kick the air. He was a little annoyed. What are you doing? How can you do this? He wasn't some kitten or puppy that could be picked up casually and thrown away after being disgusted by it. It would have been fine if he had been alone since the beginning. He wouldn't have so many complicated emotions. However, he was clearly very lucky to be following behind a very powerful person. He had watched him sweep away all obstacles and kill everyone in his way. Now, he was forced to return to the situation of fighting alone. This difference made him feel a little depressed. Although he was depressed, the chaotic battle assembly had to continue. The woman watched as Lu Ye's figure disappeared. She looked around before quickly taking out a spirit artifact and activating its power. The next moment, her body dimmed and her chi was withdrawn a lot. She wasn't a ghost cultivator and didn't have that many concealment methods. She could only use the power of spirit artifacts to achieve this. However, her wealth was limited and the spirit artifacts she used weren't of high grade, so this kind of concealment wasn't complete. It was better than nothing. She had seen the dangers of this space when following Lu Yi. She didn't dare to stay. She determined the direction and flew towards a nearby dead star. To her, this kind of dead star was a relatively safe place to hide. Along the way, there would be sounds of battle erupting from time to time. She didn't dare to get close at all and kept far away. There were a few times when the battle erupted in front of her and was very intense. She didn't know if it was luck, but her journey was very smooth and she soon landed on the dead star. It was much quieter here. She flew at a low altitude, wanting to find a quiet, remote, and hidden place to hide. It would be best if she could hide forever. She didn't expect to be able to last until the end. She just needed to last for a few days. This way, she could accumulate some chips. It might not be a lot, but for her it was enough. It was a good idea, but after a short while, just as she was looking around, her heart suddenly tensed up. She inexplicably felt like she was being watched by a hidden poisonous snake. When the great sense of crisis suddenly descended, her whole body felt a stabbing pain, as if she was being pricked by needles. A ghost cultivator. She immediately realized the seriousness of the matter. A ghost cultivator was attacking her. She hurriedly took out a protective spirit artifact that she had prepared in advance to cover her body. At the same time, she quickly rushed forward. She didn't choose to fight the other party head-on because the other party had already taken the initiative. Under the premise of not knowing the strength of the enemy, rashly coming into contact was extremely unwise. Moreover, she was only at the early stage of the constellation realm. In this kind of situation, her cultivation was already at the bottom. It was impossible for there to be anyone with a lower cultivation than her. Then, she felt a violent spiritual energy fluctuation erupting behind her. Accompanied by a cry of surprise, in the blink of an eye, the commotion subsided. She didn't know what had happened, but she felt a somewhat familiar aura. She turned around in disbelief and saw Fa Wuzuan, who had abandoned her. At this moment he was half kneeling on the ground. Below him, a petite figure was crawling. He used his knee to press against her lower back. Her pure white neck was raised high because Fa Wuzuan's large hand was covering her mouth and pinching her cheeks, making her pose very awkward. Not only that, Fa Wuzuan's blood-red long saber was pressed against the side of her neck. It looked like he could stab it in at any time. She had seen Fa Wuzuan's strength more than once. She naturally knew that a ghost cultivator at the early stage of the constellation realm would not be able to do anything in front of him. The moment this ghost cultivator wanted to attack her, she would be taken down by Fa Wuzuan. The girl suddenly smiled happily because she realized that she hadn't been abandoned. Fa Wuzuan had been secretly following beside her all this time. He was using her as bait. Not far away, Fa Wuzuan maintained his half-kneeling position. The ghost cultivator didn't dare to make any rash moves. She wanted to retreat, but her mouth was pinched. Her small mouth formed a circle and she couldn't even make a sound. Her mouth hurt. Her lower back hurt too. Her neck hurt too. A voice sounded in her ear. "I'll give you two choices. I'll kill you now. Or you can be my companion, the kind that we can trust each other. Which one do you choose?" The ghost cultivator couldn't speak. She could only pat the ground twice, indicating for her to choose the second choice. What choice did she have? If she didn't want to die, there was only one choice. That cold voice sounded again, wise choice. Then she felt all the restraints disappear. She jumped up. She wanted to distance herself, but she didn't dare to move after standing still. Because at that moment, the faintly discernible aura that had locked onto her suddenly became extremely fierce. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead. She stood stiffly on the spot. Only then did she have the time to size up the person who attacked her just now. She was very surprised because the other party looked extremely young. This wasn't just a youth who had taken good care of himself, but a true youth. Middle stage constellation realm cultivation. Thinking about what happened to her just now, the ghost cultivator was sure that this person was very strong. Stronger than all the middle stage cultivators she had seen before. Why are you looking at me like that? Are you unhappy? Lu Yi stared at her. The reason why he asked this was mainly because this ghost cultivator was looking at him with her head tilted. It gave people the feeling that she was looking at him with contempt from the corner of her eyes. The ghost cultivator was bitter. You twisted my neck. As she said that, she turned her body slightly, and her gaze finally met Lu Yi's. Lu Yi recalled that when he took her down just now, he seemed to have used a little too much force. He heard a cracking sound from her neck. It seemed like she was really injured, but it shouldn't be a big deal. Lu Yi nodded and didn't argue with her. He instructed the woman beside him, explain the situation to her. They were both women, and they were both in the early stage of the constellation realm. They should have some common topics, so it was undoubtedly better to let her speak. The woman quickly went forward and pulled the ghost cultivator's hand, and started whispering to her. Lu Yi didn't know what she was talking about, or if she could accurately express his intentions. But since he had handed the matter over to her, then let her be. When she vaguely heard the 3 words Fa Wuzuan, the ghost cultivator's gaze started to become strange. She glanced at Lu Yi from time to time, then nodded repeatedly. Lu Yi waited for a while before the woman pulled the ghost cultivator to him and said, let's agree on this. We're companions now and will follow you from now on. The ghost cultivator was a little wary. She still tilted her head and asked Lu Yi, what are you after? She was afraid that he would say that he was after her body, but she didn't expect that. Lu Yi pondered for a while, and then said righteously, helping the weak is our duty as a cultivator. What do I need? The ghost cultivator obviously didn't believe it. There might be such a person in the world, but the guy in front of her was definitely not one. But since things had come to this, she seemed to have no other choice. And if the guy in front of her was really Fa Wuzuan, it was a good thing to be his companion. Any other questions? Lu Yi asked. The ghost cultivator wanted to shake her head, but she didn't. No. In this case, let's get to know each other first. I'm Fa Wuzuan. Lu Yi glanced at the woman who followed him at the beginning. Speaking of which, he hadn't asked her name yet. He was too lazy to ask, so he said casually, forget it. She's Xiao Dai. Then he looked at the ghost cultivator. Your crooked teeth. Xiao Dai, ? Crooked teeth, ? End of this chapter. Chapter 14:18. On the Dead Star, the expressions of the 2 women were extremely bitter. However, they had experienced Fa Wuzuan's strength, so they didn't dare to have any objection. 2 companions. Finally, he could start to implement his plan. If there was only Dumbo, the twin chi and branch formation plate couldn't play any role. Although it could connect Lu Yi and Dumbo's chi to borrow each other's strength, 2 people couldn't form a formation. At least 3 people were needed. It was undoubtedly a very wise choice to let Dumbo act alone. Soon he found crooked teeth. Lu Yi took out the twin chi and branch formation plate slowly. I have a treasure, which is mysterious and unparalleled. Feel its power. As he said, he activated the power of the formation plate. When Lu Yi took out this thing in the melee, Chu Shen and Invincible Lucky Star were also shocked by Dumbo and crooked teeth. Even though they were women who hadn't seen much of the world, they felt all kinds of mysteries of the formation plate at the first time. They also felt the strong foundation in Lu Ye's body. Especially crooked teeth, she just realized Lu Ye's strength. Now it seemed that she still underestimated him. When they were feeling it, Lu Yi explained the magic of the formation plate in detail. The two couldn't help nodding, and their eyes were full of splendor. Fa Wuzuan was powerful. With the help of such a formation plate, as long as the number of enemies wasn't too many, they could go anywhere in the melee, even though the melee was large. You take it. Lu Yi handed the formation plate to Dumbo. Dumbo was happy. For me. You use it. Oh. Dumbo just reacted. She activated her spiritual power and poured it into the formation plate to familiarize herself with it. It was very easy to use the formation plate. Dumbo understood it quickly. Lu Yi gave another instruction: hold it with both hands and hold it above your head. But Dumbo didn't ask anything and did as she was told. After knowing that Lu Yi didn't abandon her from the beginning to the end, Dumbo had an inexplicable trust in him. Looking at Dumbo's appearance, Lu Yi nodded with satisfaction. Do this when you encounter enemies. Pay attention to recovering your spiritual power. Crooked Teeth looked coldly at the side. She couldn't bear to look directly. She only felt that Dumbo looked silly. Lu Yi turned to look at her. I still need to find 2 more companions. I want them to be in the early stage of the constellation realm. Have you met any suitable candidates? The crooked teeth hid here. Obviously, it knew that its strength was not enough. Once it was discovered, it would probably become the achievement of others. Dumbo also came here, which meant that there might be more constellations hiding on this dead star in the early stage. After I came here, I only met you guys. There was no one else. Crooked Teeth replied, but I have a question. Speak. Shouldn't a powerhouse like you find other powerhouses and join forces with them? Why do you insist on finding an early-stage constellation as your companion? Lu Yi looked straight into her bright eyes. My favorite thing to do is to help the weak. Oh! Crooked Teeth seemed to understand and turned his head to curl his lips. Let's go! Lu Yi called out and took the lead to fly out. Little Dumb and Crooked Tooth followed closely behind like 2 protectors. Lu Yi decided to plow through this Death Star. He might be able to find something. If he couldn't find it on this Death Star, he would go to other Death Stars. The chaotic battle arena was so big. Even if there weren't many people participating in the early stages, he would still be able to find someone who met his requirements. Even if he couldn't find someone, it didn't matter. A 5-man team was only his goal. 4 or 3 people could also display the power of the twin spirit-connected branches array disc. As he flew at a low altitude, his divine perception spread out in all directions, making sure that he did not miss anything. Crooked Teeth Xiao was not the only cultivator hiding on this dead star. There were other constellations as well. Lu Ye's team consisted of 3 people, 1 mid-stage and 2 early-stage. Their configuration was low-end, and they had no intention of hiding, so it was easy for them to be targeted. Along the way, they encountered a few battles. They were all caused by people who sensed their auras and took the initiative to stir up trouble. Since they had taken the initiative to come here, they naturally had a certain degree of confidence. At the very least, their strength on the surface should surpass Lu Ye's team. But after exchanging blows, all of them were defeated without exception. After a few big battles, there was no one left on the dead star. Dumbo was not surprised. After all, when he followed Lu Yi before, he fought alone. Now the 3 of them were together, and Lu Ye's strength was stronger than before. It seemed that those invading enemies were vulnerable. Crooked Teeth Xiao's vision was broadened. Originally, he was forced to join this team, so he was a little reluctant. But now he knew that this was his biggest luck this time. When flying out of the dead star, Dumbo couldn't help but ask, Senior Fellow Apprentice Fa, wasn't there an early-stage constellation just now? Why did you eliminate him? Speaking of which, the early-stage constellation was also unlucky. He hid well, but somehow he was found by Fa Wuzuan. The result was naturally not good. He's too ugly. Lu Yi replied casually. Crooked Teeth Xiao was speechless. In fact, before finding Crooked Teeth Xiao, Lu Ye's goal was simply the early-stage constellation. But after finding Crooked Teeth Xiao, he thought of more. Since he wanted to show the power of the twin spirit-connected branches array disk and make it famous, then the visual effect must be considered. In this three-person team, except for himself, the other two were women, and each of them was very beautiful. If he found two more beautiful women, the visual effect would undoubtedly be outstanding. On the contrary, if there were men joining, it seemed to destroy the beauty. So Lu Yi decided that the next candidate he would find was better to go without than to be substandard. First, the cultivation should be at the early stage constellation. Second, it should be women, and they should be beautiful women. It was not easy to find such a target, but even if he couldn't find one, it didn't matter. Dumbo and Crooked Teeth Qiao were enough. When leading the two of them to fly to the next dead star, Lu Yi suddenly caught a glimpse of something strange from the corner of his eyes. When he turned his head and looked into the distance, he saw several purple lights blooming everywhere in the starry sky. The lights were not bright at first, but soon became dazzling, directly illuminating the vast void with purple, and then slowly converging. What came with it was a very strong fluctuation of spiritual power. A treasure has appeared. Crooked Teeth Qiao was a little excited. In the Chaos Assembly, there were not only confrontations between cultivators, but also many unexpected events. This was also the operation of the Constellation Hall's rules. Just like now, when an inexplicable treasure suddenly appeared, it would inevitably cause cultivators from all sides to go investigate and fight over it, which would intensify the intensity of the competition. The treasures that appeared in the battlefield of the Chaos Assembly didn't have any rules. There were all kinds of things. Some could be brought out, and some could only be used in this battlefield and couldn't be brought out. It was hard to say which was more valuable. The treasures that could be brought out were naturally valuable because they could be sold. Someone once obtained a treasure that could only be used in the Moon Jade realm and easily sold it for hundreds of thousands of spiritual jades. It could be said to be a classic example of getting rich overnight. The treasures that couldn't be brought out were not completely worthless because they could be used to fight here. They were often very powerful and had all kinds of strange effects. Cultivators could even rely on these treasures to defeat stronger opponents and win by surprise. So in the Chaos Assembly, strength was not the only thing that mattered. Luck was also equally important. The treasures that appeared in the battlefield of the Chaos Assembly were mostly heavenly treasures, but there were also other types of treasures. The so-called heavenly treasures were basically limited by the number of times they could be used. They were the kind that couldn't be used after a certain number of times. When Lu Yi learned about these things, the first thing he thought of was the Cloud River Battlefield's hunting ground. The rules of the hunting ground and the rules of the Chaos Assembly had a lot of similarities. This was not a coincidence. It was because the previous experts of the 9 regions had poured too much effort into the creation of the Plate of Heavenly Secrets. Those experts must have also participated in the Constellation Hall Chaotic Assembly. Therefore, the Plate of Heavenly Secrets contained this information. The Heavenly Secrets Plate's artifact spirit had fused with the 9 provinces' world essence, giving birth to the artifact spirit, Little 9. Little 9 naturally had some understanding of the rules of the Chaos Assembly. The hunting ground it created was, to a large extent, an imitation of the Chaos Assembly. However, the size of the hunting ground was different, and the cultivators participating were different. The hunting ground had a hunting list, but the Chaos Assembly didn't. However, the Chaos Assembly itself was a form of competition in the Constellation Hall. In the end, the cultivators' gains and achievements would be reflected on the hunting list. It had only been 2 days since the Chaos Assembly began. This was the first time a treasure had appeared, and no one knew what it was. With such an unexpected event, anyone would be unable to hold back their curiosity. Those with strong cultivations could take the opportunity to increase their gains, and those with weak cultivations could also join in the fun to see if there were any benefits to be gained. Of course, the most important point was that every time a treasure appeared, there would be a large amount of pure starry sky energy in the area where the treasure was located. Its essence was the same as the mysterious light that fell from the sky at the end of the arena battle. For the cultivators who frequently participated in the battle, this was a good opportunity to quickly replenish their own consumption. Therefore, in the battlefield of the Chaos Assembly, every time a treasure appeared, the cultivators would gather and the battle would be at its fiercest. Lu Yi knew that the opportunity he had been waiting for had come. On this side, he was simply leading Dumbo and Crooked Teeth to kill, so the attention he could attract was limited. However, the appearance of a treasure was different. Every time a treasure appeared, a large amount of attention would be focused on it. However, there were several treasures appearing this time, and they seemed to be of the same type. In other words, there would be several battlefields. Lu Yi didn't deliberately choose one, and only stared at the one closest to him. He didn't rush forward, but stopped and ordered, "Hurry up and recover. You won't have time to recover when the battle starts." When the two women heard this, they both knew that the real test was about to come. If it was an ordinary three-person team with such cultivation, it would be best not to get involved in such a thing, so as to avoid unnecessary danger. However, Fa Wuzuan was a guy who didn't want to be left out. Naturally, he would join in wherever the fun was. They didn't persuade him, because the two women felt that Fa Wuzuan's strength was qualified to participate. They immediately took out spiritual jades and silently recovered. End of chapter. Chapter 1419. The appearance of the unknown treasure attracted the attention of all the cultivators. Following the appearance of the purple light, the cultivators hidden in various places were like sharks that had smelled blood. One after another, they revealed themselves and rushed towards their chosen targets. In a short time, the area where the purple lights were became lively, as if a handful of salt had been sprinkled into a hot pot. The spiritual tattoos surged chaotically, and colorful lights bloomed. It seemed that someone had ignited brilliant fireworks in these areas. However, under this beautiful and colorful surface, there was a huge danger and crisis. The cultivators, on the other hand, did not hesitate. In fact, it could even be said that they were enjoying it. Lu Yi waited for a while until the battlefield closest to him was lively enough. Then he waved the bloody long saber in his hand and led Dumbo and Crooked Teeth to rush forward. Dumbo listened to Lu Ye's previous exhortation. He raised the formation plate high and put it on top of his head. He urged the spiritual power to pour into it to maintain the power of the formation plate. The three of them still formed the simplest three talents battle array and rushed into the chaotic battlefield. The first to bear the brunt were the two late-stage constellation warriors. These two people were obviously in a state of cooperation. No one knew whether they had known each other before or formed a temporary alliance after coming here. But they were undoubtedly experienced. At this time, they did not rashly approach the location of the treasure, but just wandered around the periphery. Because they knew that if they rashly approached the treasure before the situation was clear, it would only lead to strong attacks from all sides. Even if they had good cultivation, they might not be able to resist. So if they wanted to grab the treasure, they had to find a way to eliminate the opponent first. Only when the situation gradually became clear, it was the best time to grab the treasure. Feeling the aura of Lu Yi and the other two people from a distance, the two people tacitly attacked from left and right. Lu Yi looked at them for a while and immediately turned his direction to meet the person on the left. The distance was quickly shortened, and they collided in an instant. The bloody long saber broke through the air and rolled up boundless red light. It was like a red tide, wrapping the enemy in it. When the violent spiritual power fluctuated and the saber light flashed, the late-stage constellation warriors' face changed dramatically. The original offensive instantly turned into a defensive position, and then he quickly retreated. However, the bloody long saber was like a maggot in a tarsal bone. It directly cut him until he doubted his life. For a moment, he had an illusion that he might have sensed wrongly. After taking a closer look, he realized that the person holding the saber was indeed only at the middle stage. If he had been alone, the situation would have been dire. However, he still had a companion. While they were fighting, his companion had also closed in. Lu Yi didn't have the chance to kill all of them. A huge saber ray slashed out, forcing the late-stage star constellation in front of him to retreat. At the same time, he changed the direction of his saber and faced the second person. This second late-stage constellation warrior's strength was slightly stronger than the first person, but not by much. Originally, when he saw that his companion was at a disadvantage, he was still puzzled. He didn't know why his temporary ally performed so poorly. It was only when he faced that blood-colored long saber that he understood the profundity. The soft persimmon that the two of them thought was actually a tough nut to crack. There was not much difference in strength, and this person's experience was not much better than his companion's. He immediately understood that it was impossible for him to defeat this group of three who were not very strong. Unless his companions came to help him, he would have a chance. However, as soon as this thought appeared in his mind, his expression changed dramatically. This was because when he faced Lu Yi, he could clearly see a ghostly figure appear behind his companion. That figure then attacked like lightning. His companion, who had the cultivation of the late stage, didn't even notice it. Blood bloomed, and his companion's chest was broken. A small hand holding a beating heart reached out from inside. The scene was horrifying and terrifying. The moment of shock made his situation worse. When he realized that something was wrong, he still had a little chance to get rid of Lu Yi, but now it was too late to get rid of him. Realizing that his life would be in danger if he didn't leave, this late-stage constellation warrior didn't hesitate anymore. He resisted Lu Ye's fierce attacks and withdrew from the battlefield. The most important thing was that he was afraid that the ghost cultivator who suddenly appeared would kill him in the entanglement. If he was forced to withdraw from this place, it would also be counted as Lu Ye's harvest. After the chaotic battle was over, it would also increase his accumulation. Although Dumbo and Crooked Teeth didn't fight in this battle, they did contribute after all. Naturally, they could get a share. After eliminating this late-stage constellation warrior, Lu Yi immediately turned his head and looked to one side. At a glance, he saw a familiar figure who was seizing his trophies. Ghost. Lu Yi really didn't know that this woman was also in the chaotic battle, but it was not strange for her to sign up for such a battle. This woman was born in the Ghost clan and was a natural ghost cultivator. Her strength was extremely good, which was most suitable for such a chaotic battlefield. In front of her, the late-stage constellation warrior who was forced to retreat by Lu Yi had his chi annihilated. There was a hole in his chest, and blood was gushing out. This was blatantly snatching the kill. And snatching the trophies. Lu Yi held a long knife and led Dumbo and Crooked Teeth to kill Ghost. This woman just looked up at him, and the corners of her eyes curved as if she was smiling at him. Then her figure suddenly disappeared without a trace. When Lu Yi arrived at the place and spread out his divine thoughts, he couldn't find any trace of her. He didn't know where she was hiding. Standing there in silence for a moment, Lu Yi took out the musical notes to check. Through the traces of the musical notes, he could infer that Ghost was indeed in the chaotic battle, but Puku wasn't here. Maybe he didn't sign up, or he wasn't selected. But even if Puku was here, Lu Yi couldn't join hands with him. Fei Wuzuan was going to do something big, and it was not suitable for him to involve people he knew. As for Ghost, Lu Yi was sure that she didn't recognize him. It was just a coincidence. Maybe this woman's original target was the three of them, but with the failure of the late-stage constellation warrior in the battle, she changed her target. Now that she had hidden, there was no need to continue searching. Putting away the musical notes, he continued to kill. It had been 2 days since the chaotic battle began. During these 2 days, most of the cultivators found their temporary allies, either in pairs or in groups of 3 or 5. But they were all in the constellation realm. Even if they joined hands with others, it was impossible to have too many people, because it would be chaotic if there were too many people. Human nature was complicated. The basis of joining hands was a certain degree of trust. If there were too many people, the foundation of trust would not exist. There were also some who fought alone. These people either had such a personal style or were powerful. Take Ghost as an example. She was a late-stage ghost cultivator, so she was suitable to act alone and sneak around. She didn't need to care about anyone, and no one could care about her. She would take advantage if there was something, and hide if there wasn't. She was very free and easy. Other teams were more cautious. Even if they were interested in the treasure, they wouldn't approach it rashly. But Lu Ye's team didn't care so much. he led his two allies all the way and quickly approached the location of the purple light. On the way, they kept fighting with the enemies. Some of them were intercepted by others, and some of them took the initiative to attack others. It could even be said that two groups were locked in a fight, and Lu Ye's team also rushed over to interfere, which made the other side extremely uncomfortable. There was only one principle when rushing forward. Anyone who blocked the way ahead was an enemy. Lu Ye's team seemed to be invincible, but Dumbo and Crooked Teeth were sweating. They only felt Fa Wuzuan's strength before, but now they realized his madness. Under such a rush, even if Fa Wuzuan bore the most pressure, their hearts still beat fast in the face of the continuous attack of the Saber Light, Sword Shadow, and many spells. If Fa Wuzuan could maintain such an irresistible force, their lives wouldn't be in danger. But once Fa Wuzuan's attack was blocked, the two of them would inevitably fall into a great crisis. At that time, even if the three of them maintained their formation, they might not be able to protect themselves. But there was not much they could do now. Except for protecting themselves, they could only pray that Fa Wuzuan was strong enough. The battlefield where Lu Yi was fierce and lively, and the other battlefields where the treasure was located were also very lively. At the same time, countless pairs of eyes were gathered on these battlefields, eagerly watching. In the 935th hall, next to the points list, Chu Shen, who was eliminated, was immersed in the list, checking with rapt attention. The Battle Royale was the most special form of the competition in the Constellation Palace. Because in other forms, the cultivators who didn't participate in the battle couldn't see the battle scene. Only the Battle Royale could. Like Chu Shen at this moment, immersing his mind in the points list, he could enter the battlefield of the Battle Royale from a strange perspective. In this perspective, he could see some things and feel some things, but he couldn't do anything. Since he was eliminated, he had maintained this state. That strange perspective had always been beside Lu Yi, as if he was invisible, overlooking Lu Yi from a high place. He clearly saw Lu Yi avenging him by forcing a woman in the early stage of the Constellation Palace. He also saw Lu Yi take the woman and kill everyone. He also saw Lu Yi and the woman separated, and then quietly followed her to a dead star. He also saw the scene of him taking Crooked Teeth down. Until now, Chu Shen was very sad. Because originally, he was invincible behind Lu Yi. In the end, he was eliminated early, and now two women jumped out of nowhere to take advantage of him. Just as he was feeling lonely, he suddenly heard someone beside him say, "Senior brother, look at the battlefield here. This three-person team is very powerful. Although there's only one middle stage and two early stage, they actually killed the late-stage cultivators to the point where they couldn't even fight back." But the senior brother beside him was instantly interested. That junior brother hurriedly told him the location of the battlefield and the characteristics of the three-person team. A moment later, the senior brother also found the location of Lu Ye's team. After looking around, he couldn't help but be shocked. What's up with these three people? How can they be so powerful? When he heard his junior brother say it just now, he thought it was a bit exaggerated. One middle stage and two early stage cultivators, no matter how powerful they were, how powerful could they be? But after seeing it with his own eyes, he finally understood what it meant to cut melons and vegetables. Chapter 1420. The conversation between the senior and junior brothers piqued the interest of the surrounding cultivators. Even star constellations liked to watch a show, especially the cultivators gathered around the ranking board. Everyone came with the intention of watching a show. Since there was such a show, who wouldn't want to take a few more glances? Soon, under the guidance of the senior and junior brothers, a large group of people's gazes gathered on the battlefield where Lu Yi was. Hearing the exclamations and praises around him, Chu Shen's already sad mood became even sadder. Such a big opportunity to be in the limelight and make a name for himself was ruined by him. He really wanted to cry but had no tears. Although he wasn't in a good mood, he still couldn't help but say, "That's my big brother, Fa Wuzuan." Fa Wuzuan? Someone continued, "The Fa Wuzuan on the ranking board." Chu Shen said proudly, "That's right." He's ranked so high, but he's only in the middle stage? Fellow Taoist, are you mistaken? Believe it or not. Chu Shen was too lazy to explain. However, someone said, that's indeed Fa Wuzuan. I was fortunate enough to fight with him once. To be honest, I wasn't his match at all. Everyone looked over and saw a late-stage star constellation cultivator speaking. The reason they knew his cultivation was naturally because he intentionally revealed it. Since the person involved stood up and spoke, naturally no one doubted it. However, everyone was still amazed because according to what they knew, those who could leave their names on the ranking board were all late-stage star constellation cultivators, and they weren't ordinary late-stage star constellation cultivators. Only today did they understand that not only were there late-stage star constellation cultivators, there was also a middle-stage star constellation cultivator. It was truly an eye-opener. The cultivator surnamed Lu said, although I wasn't Fa Wuzuan's match at that time, he didn't seem to be this powerful. Someone laughed. Then he was merciful when he beat you up. The cultivator surnamed Lu didn't mind and only shook his head. It's not just because of that. The bigger reason might be that the three of them formed a formation. Many spectating cultivators expressed their agreement because under everyone's gaze, Fa Wuzuan and his two female companions did indeed form a simple tripartite formation. However, even the simplest three talents formation could only be formed by people who were familiar with each other. In this chaotic meeting, it was not easy to meet two people who were familiar with each other. It could only be said that Wuzun's luck was not bad, and the two early-stage women's luck was even better. Chu Shen was originally just casually listening, but at this moment he was suddenly startled, faintly having a bad feeling. He knew the secrets of the twin chi-connected branch array disk. After all, he had personally experienced it. However, the others didn't know. They thought that Fa Wuzuan was familiar with the two girls, which was why he was able to form the array. If someone with ulterior motives were to see through this and leak the news, then wouldn't the secret of the disk array be known to everyone? When the time came, all the major powers would focus their attention on the disk array. If someone were to buy it from Fa Wuzuan at a high price, Chu Shen's expression became serious. But on second thought, the big shot had already promised to give him the disk array. He shouldn't go back on his word. After all, they were both people who had left their names on the chip accumulation leaderboard. Their words were like nails, and they wouldn't go back on their word. He comforted himself. Once the chaotic meeting was over, the precious disk array would be his. Then he could take the disk array and negotiate with his mother so that she wouldn't care about him in the future. That way, he could be free and unfettered. Wouldn't that be perfect? Thinking of this, Chu Shen couldn't help but laugh. However, the words of the person next to him made his mood instantly become uneasy. Why is that woman carrying the disk array on her head? Chu Shen's expression immediately became fierce. He wished he could rush into the battlefield and beat up that dazed-looking woman so that she could hide the disk array. The mystery of the disk array could not be exposed. At this time, it wasn't just the cultivators in the hall who were paying attention to Lu Ye's group of three. Countless pairs of eyes from all over the hall were focused on them. Perhaps some people didn't notice before, but as they scanned the battlefield, the eye-catching performance of Lu Ye's group naturally attracted everyone's attention. There were also some people with good eyesight who saw the disk array's extraordinariness, but as for how mysterious it was, they couldn't feel it without personally experiencing it. On the battlefield of the chaotic meeting, Lu Yi had led Dumbo and Crooked Teeth to a place not far from the treasure. Before, when they were not close enough, they didn't know what the treasure was, but now that they were close enough, they realized that it was a purple amulet. No wonder it was full of purple when it was born, and there were several of them at once. There was no doubt that it could be sold. Of course, if it was an ordinary purple amulet, even if it was valuable, its value would be limited. For the constellation realm, it was barely a good harvest and could be sold for some spiritual jades. But if it was a purple amulet of the dwarf clan, its value would be huge. Lu Yi didn't know whether the purple amulet was an ordinary one or a purple amulet of the dwarf clan, but a treasure that appeared on the battlefield of the chaotic meeting shouldn't be too shabby, so it was very likely to be the latter. However, as his group approached, attacks came from all directions. Obviously, his action of preparing to collect the treasure had aroused the hostility of all the cultivators, which was why no one had collected the purple amulet until now. No one could get close to it. Even if it was Lu Ye's squad, in the face of such an offensive, they could only temporarily avoid the spearhead. Their momentum didn't stop, and they continued to charge forward, still invincible. The only thing that made Lu Yi angry was that Ghost had been wandering nearby. Her figure came and went like a ghost. Lu Yi could occasionally catch her traces, but considering that they knew each other, it was not good to really attack, so he could only let her do whatever she wanted. However, this woman didn't have any self-awareness and had already stolen many people's heads. Without exception, those who were targeted by this woman had their hearts dug out and died. She was extremely ruthless. Lu Yi was going to find a chance to teach her a lesson, so that she would know that it was not so easy to steal his heads. The group quickly killed their way to the edge of the battlefield on the other side. At this moment, there were two groups of people fighting fiercely here. Lu Yi didn't think too much, but when he looked over, his eyes lit up. Because there were two early-stage Constellation Realm cultivators in one group, and they were both women. These two early-stage Constellation Realm cultivators were not only as beautiful as flowers, but also looked exactly the same. What was more rare was that they were two sword cultivators. Without a doubt, they were the twin sisters. The two of them had probably cultivated a type of joint attack technique. They each activated their sword chi and gathered it into a river. One sword river enveloped the surroundings as a defense, while the other sword river was controlled by the two sisters. They fought fiercely against their enemies. The situation was not good. Although they still had a late-stage companion, there were more enemies fighting with them, and their overall cultivation was stronger. Lu Yi looked at the two sisters with bright eyes, but when his vision turned to their late-stage companion, his face was full of disgust. This late-stage companion was a male body cultivator with rough skin and thick flesh. He had to find a way to get rid of him. If he ignored him, Lu Yi was afraid that the two sisters would be eliminated first. Both of them were early-stage sword cultivators. Although they had the protection of the sword river, they were also tottering under the enemy's strong attack. He thought of something and transmitted the sound, "Do you see that body cultivator over there? Eliminate him, and I'll call it even for you to steal my head." Dumbo and Crooked Teeth were confused. They could feel that he was transmitting the sound to someone, but they didn't know who he was transmitting the sound to. There was no response. Lu Yi was not surprised, but he was sure that Ghost was nearby, but she hid very well. 2,000 spiritual jades. Lu Yi took out an empty storage ring, put 2,000 spiritual jades in it, and then bent his fingers and flicked it casually. The storage ring flew not far away, and a small hand appeared out of thin air and caught it. At the same time, Ghost's voice came to Lu Ye's ears, "I take your money, and I have to eliminate your disaster. I'll take this deal." After a short while, a ghost-like figure suddenly appeared behind the body cultivator who was resisting the enemy's strong attack. As usual, her hand was as fast as lightning, going straight for the body cultivator's back. The body cultivator's face suddenly changed. His chi and blood were surging, and his flesh and blood were shaking. Ghost had attacked many times before, and there was no precedent of failure. It was not only the reflection of her own strength, but also the clever timing of her attack. In addition, the people who were attacked by her were all concentrating on resisting Lu Ye's strong attack, so they were not prepared for the crisis coming from behind. But this time was different. After all, she was dealing with a body cultivator. As the body cultivator's flesh and blood squirmed, Ghost's hand that had pierced into his body was unable to move an inch further, as if it was stuck. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the body cultivator suddenly rushed forward. Ghost took the opportunity to withdraw her hand, and as she did so, her figure disappeared. The body cultivator's situation was getting worse. Although he had forcefully escaped Ghost's attack, what greeted him was an even more violent attack from the enemy. With a helpless sigh, he retreated on the spot. His figure disappeared, and many attacks hit empty air. The sword cultivator's sisters' expressions became solemn. Originally, they had a body cultivator companion to share the pressure for them, so they could barely hold on, but with their companion's withdrawal, the the two of them were unable to continue. The two of them were also decisive. Realizing that things were not going well, they immediately urged the Sword River protecting them to merge with the other Sword River, preparing to make a last stand. At this moment, a fierce aura came from the side, causing the two sisters to become vigilant and their attacks to slow down. Immediately after, they saw three figures brazenly charging into the already chaotic battlefield. The enemies that the two of them had been struggling to deal with were actually unable to withstand a single blow from these three people. In just one collision, the enemy had already lost a member, and the one who lost was the strongest of the enemy, the late-stage constellation cultivator. The three people who had charged into the battlefield swept past them. The two sisters were still vigilant, but the moment they brushed past each other, the two of them were surprised to find that an inexplicable force had enveloped them, allowing their auras to easily connect with the other three. There was no discussion, nor the slightest exchange of words. The two sisters looked at each other, and with a leap, they almost instinctively joined the other party's formation. The aura of Lu Yi, who was in the lead, became even more violent. End of chapter. Chapter 1421. When the three of them were in a formation, Lu Ye's team's attacks were already extremely sharp. Now that they were in a five-man formation, they were even more formidable. On the other hand, the enemies they were targeting after losing a late-stage constellation realm cultivator were unable to perform well. Coupled with the great danger brought by the phantom's flickering figure, they were even more wary of attacking. In just a few moments of fighting, this relatively strong team was completely annihilated, either injured or dead, leaving the scene in a sorry state. In the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance, Lu Quan politely sent Lu Yi to the door. Most of the cultivators in the outer circle were relatively poor, unless they were disciples from large sections. As such, it wasn't easy to come across a transaction worth a few dozen spirit stones. Moreover, Lu Ye's personality was quite straightforward, so Lu Quan naturally wanted to become more familiar with him so that he could take care of business in the future. After watching Lu Ye's figure disappear, Lu Quan turned around and a fragrant wind blew in his face. Someone was standing behind him. "You scared me," Lu Quan grumbled. "Why are you standing behind me instead of greeting the guests?" The person said sweetly, "I missed you." Lu Quan glanced around with a guilty conscience and found that no one was paying attention to them, so he lowered his voice and said, "I'll look for you when I get off work tonight." "Sure," the woman replied with a smile. Lu Quan walked towards the hall as if nothing had happened and greeted the other guests. The woman glanced in the direction Lu Yi left, a thoughtful look in her eyes. When night fell, they naturally lingered around each other and stopped. The two of them chatted casually, and the topic was intentionally or unintentionally led by the woman to their daily transactions. Lu Quan was a little sleepy, so he responded intermittently and soon fell asleep. The woman laid in his arms, but she found it difficult to fall asleep. If she wasn't mistaken, the customer during the day was the one she received half a month ago. He sold a lot of ores and bought some spirit pills before leaving. She didn't expect that in just half a month he would come to sell ores again. Looking at the guest's appearance, there was no doubt that he was a loose cultivator. A loose cultivator who had no one to rely on was able to amass a fortune of dozens of spirit stones in such a short period of time. If she worked in the Tianji Business Alliance, including the extra income, she would at most get 12 or 13 spiritual stones per month. This reminded her of her days as a loose cultivator. When she compared them, she couldn't help but feel a little bitter. After letting her imagination run wild for a long time, she finally felt sleepy. However, she couldn't sleep well. At the same time, Lu Yi was cultivating in a cave on Mount Azure Cloud. During the day, after he finished his business at the Tianji Business Alliance, he bought a lot of food with the remaining spirit stones and rushed back without stopping. Only then did he make it back before nightfall. With enough spirit pills, he immediately began to take them and cultivate. As the spiritual pills were consumed one by one, the spiritual energy in the 15th orifice was gradually filled up, and it continued to rush towards the 16th orifice. 12 days later, Lu Yi sat cross-legged in the cave, meditating. Today was a big day. If everything went well, he would break through to the second-order spirit stream realm today. Since returning 12 days ago, he had consumed more than 30 spirit accumulation pills one after another and finally opened the 18th orifice. Moreover, he had already cultivated the 18th orifice to the brim level. Recalling the cultivation route in the Golden Cicada free art, Lu Yi urged his spiritual energy, starting from the 10th orifice, going through the 11th orifice, the 12th, and finally the 18th. When he reached the first-order spirit stream realm, he had done this before, so now he was quite familiar with it and didn't encounter any difficulties. His spiritual energy smoothly passed through the 9 spirit apertures and slowly flowed like a stream. With Lu Ye's practice, the spiritual energy in the 9 spirit apertures continued to flow faster and faster, cycling back and forth. When it reached its limit, Lu Yi felt his body shake and a wave of energy swept out. The spiritual energy in the 10th to 18th orifice began to circulate on its own. Second-order spirit stream realm, success. Having had such an experience before, Lu Yi wasn't too happy about it. Instead, he was indifferent to it. Today, he was no longer the little 3-orifice cultivator who had wandered into the spirit stream battlefield 2 months ago. If reaching the first-order spirit stream realm gave him the qualifications to survive in the outer ring of the battlefield, then reaching the second-order spirit stream realm gave him the qualifications to walk freely. Of course, there was still a gap between him and those cultivators with higher cultivation, but Lu Yi was already very satisfied. Compared to him, he had spent about 40 days, but from the first to the second layer, he had used less than a month. The main reason was that he had sufficient cultivation resources, but even so, this cultivation speed was still extremely terrifying. One had to know that in the early stages of cultivation, a cultivator would need about 10 days to open a new orifice. This was because their main method of cultivation was to absorb world energy. If their cultivation wasn't high enough, the efficiency of absorbing world energy wouldn't be high, so their cultivation speed naturally wouldn't be fast. This situation would only improve slightly after reaching the 4th-order spirit stream realm. In other words, in the early stages of cultivation, it was normal for an ordinary cultivator to break through 1 layer in 3 months, but for Lu Yi, he could break through 1 layer in a month on average. This was the joy of cultivation. When he was in the first order, Lu Ye's body only had a small cycle from the source spirit aperture to the 9th orifice, but after reaching the second order, there was an additional cycle from the 10th orifice to the 18th orifice. Now, he had 2 spirit chi circulation systems in his body. As a result, he could stimulate more spirit energy in a short period of time, and the destructive power of his spirit energy would naturally be stronger. At the 3rd order, there would be 3 spirit chi circulation systems, and so on. A 9th-order spirit stream realm cultivator would have 9 spirit chi circulation systems in their body. There were still 30 spirit accumulation pills left. Although Lu Yi wanted to continue cultivating, he also knew that haste made waste. He first ate something, then walked out of the cave and found a mountain spring to take a bath. After changing into a clean set of clothes, he took out the Golden Cicada Carefree Secret Art and studied it while the spring water gurgled. Next, he wanted to advance to the 3rd-order spirit stream realm. He needed to figure out the location of the spirit apertures after the 18th orifice so that it would be convenient for him to continue cultivating. The mountains were quiet, and the occasional sound of birds chirping and insects flying could be heard. The mottled sunlight penetrated the screen of leaves and shone on the side of the young man's face, making this scene seem like a scene from a painting. "What are you doing sneaking around?" Lu Yi shouted without raising his head. On the trunk of a big tree to the side, a small head poked out. If someone who didn't know saw her appearance, they would definitely be frightened. He looked at the reading material in Lu Ye's hand. After seeing that it was a low-level secret art, she curled her lips in disdain. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi resisted the urge to punch her, tilting his head and asking, "When are you leaving?" Yes. Although Lu Yi hadn't come out to hunt during this time, this was still her and Dahu's territory. How could they allow others to sleep beside them? If it weren't for her fear of the spirit talisman in Lu Ye's hands, she would have already cooperated with De Hu to drive Lu Yi away. However, having suffered a loss at Lu Ye's hands, Yi didn't dare act rashly. What's more, Yi could see that Lu Yi was much stronger than he was 2 months ago. Lu Yi closed the book, stood up and stretched. "I'm tired, I'm going back to sleep." "Hey, I asked you a question," Yi shouted angrily, but she didn't get a response. She could only grit her teeth and curse. "Scoundrel, smelly thing, you really piss me off." "Why?" She clawed at the tree next to her, splinters flying everywhere. The spirit disappeared, and Lu Yi led his team of 4 to the purple amulet. He raised his hand and tried to grab it, but when he was about 10 inches away from the purple amulet, his hand was blocked by an invisible barrier. This was the treasure's barrier. He turned his claw into a palm, pressed it against the barrier, and poured his spiritual energy into it. When someone interfered, it was not easy to break the barrier, but when there was no interference, it was easy to break it. It only took 20 breaths of time. After being grounded for 4 hours, Lu Yi put away his sword and walked to a dark corner. He took out his water sack, washed it a little, put on his clothes and returned to the cliff. De Hu had already fallen asleep, his snores shaking the sky. He was still sitting there, probably waiting for him. However, when she saw Lu Ye's expression, she felt a little strange, because Lu Yi seemed to have made a difficult decision at the moment. He had an expression that said, "Even if there are tens of thousands of people around me, I will still go forward." 3. She couldn't help but tilt her head. Lu Yi sat down cross-legged with a knot in his stomach. After thinking for a while, he told Yi, "If I faint later, don't worry too much." Yi was puzzled. Lu Yi didn't explain too much. He closed his eyes and immersed his mind, once again seeing the talent tree entrenched in his source aperture. On the huge crown of the tree, 3 leaves were burning, and the 4th one had already bloomed, but it didn't burn. In the mine of the evil Moon Valley, the first burning leaf appeared on his talent tree, carrying a kind of sharp spirit pattern. If it weren't for the sharp spirit pattern, he wouldn't have been able to kill the seriously injured Zhou Qing so easily. He wouldn't have been able to pierce through the protective spiritual energy of the fair-skinned man, and he wouldn't have been able to severely injure the snake demon and finally win. It could be said that this spirit pattern had brought great help to Lu Yi at several critical moments. Now, 2 more leaves on the talent tree were burning. While he was nervous, he was also looking forward to what kind of spirit pattern he would get. Slowly focusing his attention, Lu Yi looked at one of the burning leaves. Just like the last time, the small leaf quickly enlarged, and in the blink of an eye, it filled all his vision and thoughts. At the same time, a large amount of information uncontrollably poured into his mind. Lu Yi once again had the feeling that someone had smashed his head with a hammer. Last time, he directly fainted. This time, although he felt that the world was spinning and the pain was unbearable, he didn't faint. Lu Yi would rather have fainted because the whole process gave him a feeling that death was better than living. It was as if someone had opened up his brain, forcibly stuffed something he didn't understand into it, and stirred it up. He suddenly opened his eyes, a suppressed growl came from his throat, and his eyes were blood red. He, who had been paying attention to him, was startled. Even the sleeping big tiger was awakened, roaring and looking around vigilantly, mistakenly thinking that they had been sneak attacked. After a while, Lu Yi gradually calmed down. His vision was blood red, and his whole body was drenched in sweat. Yi and Big Tiger stood aside in panic, not knowing what to do. In fact, Lu Ye's appearance at the moment was extremely ferocious. His eyes were blood red, and blue veins were bulging on his temples, as if he was enduring great torture. After a moment of heavy breathing, Lu Yi recovered a little and said to the nervous Big Tiger, "And it's okay." He closed his eyes again. The pain was over, and it was time to receive the fruits of victory. Yi and Big Tiger looked at each other in confusion, but this matter seemed to be related to Lu Ye's cultivation. If he didn't say anything, Yi couldn't ask and could only stand aside with Big Tiger. At this time, Lu Yi was investigating the characteristics of the second spiritual inscription. Defense. This was the name of the second spiritual inscription. From the name alone, it should be a defensive spiritual inscription. Lu Yi had some guesses before that the first spiritual inscription was on the offensive side, and perhaps the second one would be on the defensive side. Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. He opened his eyes and prepared for a moment. Suddenly, a layer of spirit light visible to the naked eye flashed on his palm. The spirit light turned into the shape of a triangular shield, engraved with complicated patterns. This is a spiritual inscription? He, who had been silently paying attention to Lu Yi, was shocked. Although she had lost a lot of memories, she still remembered some common knowledge of the cultivation world and knew more than Lu Yi. This spiritual inscription was a little unbelievable. It should be known that low-level cultivators like Lu Yi generally focused on improving their own cultivation. They didn't even have time to study spells, let alone complex spiritual inscriptions. Of course, some spells could also be regarded as the manifestation of spiritual inscriptions. It could even be said that the spiritual inscription that Lu Yi was activating now could be regarded as a defensive spell. Spells and spiritual inscriptions were closely related. Many times they were similar but not completely the same. It was difficult to explain in a few words. But in any case, it was still unbelievable that a low-level cultivator could construct spiritual inscriptions. He was more and more certain that Lu Yi was a disciple of a top sect, and his status in that sect was definitely not low. Maybe he was the illegitimate son of a sect master. Due to some unavoidable reasons, he could only come out alone to gain experience. In just a few breaths of time, she had already conjured up a novel filled with love and hatred. Lu Yi didn't care about Yi's gaze. At this moment, he was feeling the sturdiness of the defense. Purely in terms of defensive power, the defensive power of the defense completely surpassed his protective spiritual power. Comparing the two, the difference in defensive power was at least several times. This meant that if he encountered any attacks in the future, he would have a better defensive method. However, although the defensive power was outstanding, the consumption was not low. This palm-sized defense spiritual inscription consumed the spiritual power of one of Lu Yi's spiritual cavities. The consumption was even greater than the sharpness. In other words, if Lu Yi activated this spiritual inscription 20 times in a row, his spiritual power would be exhausted. Moreover, if the defensive range was expanded, the consumption would increase. Lu Yi was only activating a palm-sized defense spiritual inscription, but it didn't mean that the defense spiritual inscription was only this big. If he wanted, he could activate a bigger one. In short, this was a pretty good spiritual inscription. Although he had something like the Golden Body Talisman, there would be a time when the talisman would be exhausted. However, this defense spiritual inscription was his own ability. In comparison, activating the defense spiritual inscription was more troublesome. First, he had to take out the spiritual inscription from his storage bag and pour in spiritual power. In the midst of an intense battle, Lu Yi often didn't have the time to do these things. If he had such a spiritual inscription before meeting Regine, he could have withstood the opponent's attack and killed him in a head-on battle. Although this spiritual inscription didn't increase Lu Yi's cultivation, it greatly increased his combat power. There was still one more. Lu Yi shuddered when he thought of the previous feeling. He didn't plan to investigate the other spiritual inscription, at least not for the next 2 days. His mind was a mess now. If he investigated the spiritual inscription again, he might die. Therefore, he had to rest for a few days. Taking out a Yun spirit pill, Lu Yi prepared to investigate the question that had always puzzled him. Was it related to the talent tree that he didn't have any hidden dangers after taking pills? Calmly sensing, he soon saw the talent tree hidden in the source spiritual cavities. Chapter 1422. The spirit disappeared, and Lu Yi led his team of 4 to the purple amulet. He raised his hand and tried to grab it, but when he was about 10 inches away from the purple amulet, his hand was blocked by an invisible barrier. This was the restriction of the treasure. He turned his hand into a palm, pressed it on the restriction, and poured his spiritual power into it. It was not easy to break the restriction when someone interfered, but it was fast when no one interfered. It only took 20 breaths of time for the restriction to melt. Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed the purple amulet. He looked at it carefully and confirmed that the purple amulet was indeed a treasure from the dwarf clan. Looking up at her four companions, Kaiyue smiled slightly. Taoist brother, please accept it. We have no objection. If Lu Yi hadn't saved them, they would have been eliminated. Now they were in a formation with Lu Yi and his team. They could be said to have made a profit. The two sisters didn't think too much about the purple amulet, although they knew it was very precious. Dumbo and Crooked Teeth also hurriedly expressed that they had no objection. It was the same principle. They all knew that as long as they followed Lu Yi, they would be able to reap great rewards. Without Lu Yi, with their cultivation at the early stages, they would likely have been eliminated long ago. They had already profited greatly, so how could they ask for more? I will find someone to appraise all the spoils after we get out of here. Then I will contact you to share it. Lu Yi said. How others expressed their opinions was their business, but for Lu Yi, since they acted together, the spoils should be shared. He wasn't a person who liked to eat alone. Besides, compared with his original plan, the spoils in this Chaos Assembly battlefield could only be regarded as fragmentary. Let's go! Lu Yi called and led the formation to fly forward. He had to rush to the next battlefield. It was a rare opportunity. Naturally, the more he showed the power of the formation plate, the better. There was more than one purple amulet before. Their battlefield had been decided because of Lu Ye's team's strength, but the other battlefields were still in full swing. The distance was not close, but Lu Yi estimated that it was enough for him to rush to the second battlefield. It was true. When he led the team of 4 there, the purple amulets were still there, but the battle was not so fierce. After all, the teams that were not strong enough had been eliminated or retreated. The remaining teams were all strong. At present, there were 3 small teams that were still fighting in this battlefield. Their strengths were almost equal, and they were holding each other back. Once one of the teams made a move to collect the violet talismans, the other 2 teams would attack together, causing the situation to be rather awkward. In such a situation, it was difficult to come to a conclusion. The best way was for the 2 teams to secretly join forces and then deal with the third team. However, without enough trust between them, this method was actually very difficult to achieve. When Lu Ye's team of 5 broke into the battlefield, the other 3 teams were immediately aware of it. They scanned the area with their divine senses and discovered that the newcomers were a mid-stage and 4 early-stage cultivators. All of them were greatly surprised. This was because there weren't many early-stage cultivators participating in the Chaos Assembly to begin with, and after 2 or 3 days of elimination, a large portion of them had already been eliminated. The remaining cultivators had either attached themselves to powerhouses or found familiar companions. Therefore, there would at most be 1 early-stage Constellation Realm expert in a team. Any more and they would just be a burden. Thus, the appearance of 4 people traveling together in the early stages of the game was naturally a novelty. None of the 3 teams took them seriously. The team closest to Lu Ye's team turned around. They were prepared to eliminate Lu Ye's team first and get some loot. The 3 teams didn't know the depth of Lu Ye's team, but the cultivators from Constellation Hall who were watching the battle were very clear. This team looked very weak on the surface, but they were the final winners of the previous battle. Seeing that team recklessly approaching Lu Ye's team, they knew that they were going to be in for a bad time. They couldn't help but feel indignant. Fa Wuzuan was too treacherous. Although the team of 5 maintained their formation, there were no signs of it. They only moved forward in a relaxed manner. It didn't look like they were going to steal anything. Instead, they looked like they were going to deliver their lives. As the distance between them closed, the scene that the spectating cultivators had expected appeared. The female cultivator in charge of the formation plate suddenly held it high above her head. In an instant, the 5 people's auras connected. Spirit power surged, and a spirit power tortoise appeared out of thin air. This scene stunned the few cultivators who had come to greet them. The leader immediately yelled, "Be careful." They thought it was just 5 brainless people who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Who knew that they would form a formation in the blink of an eye. It was too late to be vigilant. With the appearance of the spirit power tortoise, the sound of swords rang out. Two sword rivers swept out from the left and right, outflanking the enemy. The Xingyu sisters' cultivation wasn't high enough, so the sword river's killing power wasn't too strong. However, with the help of the formation, it was still stronger than their own attacks. It barely reached the level of a mid-stage cultivator. This was about the same level as when they used the joint attack technique. This kind of attack naturally couldn't cause too much of a threat to the enemy, but it was enough to disturb the enemy. While these people were dealing with the sword river, the big tortoise had already rushed out. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of the late-stage Constellation Hall leader. In an instant, the late-stage Constellation Hall leader's face turned ashen because he felt a great threat descending. It was as if a black tortoise really opened its ferocious mouth at him. The saber light bloomed, and a huge force swept out. A sharp aura approached him. Even though he was a late-stage body cultivator, his protective spirit power was broken through in just 2 breaths. His chi and blood surged and roared, but he still couldn't block the violent killing. The big tortoise's attack didn't stop. The ferocious beast crushed the body cultivator's bleeding body, and its huge body directly enveloped the few cultivators behind the body cultivator. After a very short period of chaos, the expressions of the remaining 2 teams of cultivators became horrified. This was because this team, which was on par with them, was as fragile as paper in the face of the black tortoise formation formed by a mid-stage and 4 early-stage cultivators. This was the black tortoise formation, which was good at defense. Although it had extraordinary killing power, it wasn't mainly focused on defense. These guys, who were they? After the black tortoise formation led by Lu Yi dealt with the first team, it immediately rushed in the direction of the second team. The cultivators of this team didn't put them in their eyes at first, but after witnessing the tragedy with their own eyes, how could they not know the power of the black tortoise formation? Not daring to stay, the cultivator in the lead shouted and immediately fled into the distance. Lu Yi glanced at it and didn't chase after it, and rushed in the direction of the third team. The third team made the same choice as the second team. In an instant, the original stalemate was broken after the arrival of Lu Ye's team. On the huge battlefield, only Lu Ye's team was left. Just like before, he came in front of the purple talisman and put it away. "Recover!" Lu Yi ordered. He didn't need to recover himself, but the 4 temporary allies at the early stage couldn't. Moreover, he estimated that there should be many people paying attention to his team at this moment, so even if it was just for show, he still needed to recover. Moreover, for cultivators at their level, the pure energy that came with the purple talisman was also a rare treasure that could help a cultivator's strength grow rapidly. Some cultivators didn't come to this battlefield to fight for treasures, but to refine the pure energy. While he was recovering, the news about the twin chi-connected formation disk had already begun to spread all over the Constellation Hall. Many people knew that an extremely special team had appeared in the battlefield of the Chaotic Assembly. That team only had 1 mid-stage cultivator and 4 early-stage cultivators, but they were invincible wherever they went, and the root of all of this seemed to be a formation disk. That formation disk had an extremely mysterious power that allowed people to easily form a formation. Therefore, even if the overall strength of this team wasn't high, with the help of the formation, they could still defeat the strong. Countless pairs of eyes were looking for traces of Lu Ye's team, and when they found them, their eyes lit up. Lu Ye's original criteria for choosing his teammates had undoubtedly come into play at this moment. Apart from him, the leader of the team, the other 4 were all great beauties. Even Xiao Dai, who looked silly, was impeccable in terms of appearance and figure. This gave people a very strong sense of enjoyment. In addition, human nature tended to resonate with the weak, so the cultivators of Lu Ye's team were very much looking forward to the performance of these 4 women. In any case, they weren't competitors. If others were unlucky, then they could just enjoy the fun. Wasn't that wonderful? Most people were just watching the show, but many cultivators from various large factions were paying attention to the formation disk itself. They were already thinking about how to contact Fa Wuzuan after this chaotic assembly to discuss the matter of buying the formation disk. There were even some impatient people who began to inquire about people who knew Fa Wuzuan, wanting to get in touch with him as soon as possible. Chu Shen was annoyed beyond words because he had mentioned that Fa Wuzuan was his big brother. Quite a few people had heard it, and this had led to many people deliberately coming to his side. To him, that formation disc was already surnamed Chu. So many people had come to covet the treasure surnamed Chu, did they even put him in their eyes? There really weren't many people who put him in their eyes. The young master of Che Lingjie, the son of a sunshine powerhouse, was indeed well known, but Chu Shen had never made a name for himself. The cultivators of this galaxy might know him, but there were even more people who didn't know of his existence at all. It wasn't until Chu Shen revealed his identity and said Jiao Yan's name that those chattering fellows finally shut up. However, this also made the cultivators of various large factions feel more and more threatened. Jiao Yan was the sunshine powerhouse of this galaxy and had a very deep relationship with the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce. If Jiao Yan appeared, wouldn't it mean that the Wanxiang Chamber of Commerce also had their eyes on this formation disc? For the various factions who were interested in obtaining this mysterious formation disc, this wasn't good news, and there would inevitably be another strong competitor. End of chapter. Chapter 1423. In the starry sky battlefield of the Chaos Assembly, Lu Ye's team was really invincible, which made the cultivators who were watching the battle exclaim in satisfaction. Basically, every cultivator who dared to underestimate this team paid a very heavy price. It was really because the cultivation of Lu Yi and others was too confusing, especially the cultivation of Dumbo and the other three at the early stage. For the cultivators who participated in the Chaos Assembly, they were like 4 pieces of delicious cake emitting a charming taste, and everyone wanted to take a bite. So many times, people took the initiative to provoke them, but they kicked an iron plate and were eliminated. During this period of time, they did encounter some fellows with decent strength. One of them was even a powerful character ranked in the top 30 of the chips list. This person was confident in his strength and acted alone. He did not form an alliance with anyone. When he encountered Lu Ye's team, he did not launch a sneak attack. Instead, he openly attacked them. As a result, Lu Yi led the 4 beautiful women to teach him a lesson, and he was seriously injured and forced to withdraw from this place. It was also this battle that made the cultivators who were watching the battle feel more and more the power of Lu Ye's team. Although this team had no opponents before, even if they encountered cultivators at the late stage, they were not the top ones. The spectators only knew that Lu Ye's team was very strong, but as for how strong they were, there was no way to have a clear idea without experiencing it personally. Until after this battle, the powerhouses ranked in the top 30 on the chips list undoubtedly represented the highest level of the constellation realm, but even such powerhouses were still vulnerable. Of course, Fa Wuzuan's personal strength was the foundation, but the main credit was still the formation. It made people more and more understand the mystery of the formation plate. A few days later, in a place shrouded in pure energy, Dumbo and the other 3 women were cultivating quietly, and Lu Yi was responsible for guarding all sides. In a few days, a lot of strange treasures appeared on this battlefield. Lu Ye's team also participated in the fight for them repeatedly, not only for the treasures, but also for the gains. The harvest was not bad. In such a battlefield, although the treasures had been taken away, the pure energy that had descended along with the treasures would often remain. There was no way the cultivators could stay here forever. They had to refine the energy before leaving. Doing so would take a great deal of time. At the same time, there was also the risk of them being targeted. As a result, any area in this battlefield where treasures had appeared was quite suitable for cultivation and recovery. After several days of competition, more than half of the cultivators participating in the Chaos Assembly had been eliminated. Now, it was impossible to find people as easily as before. Often, even after searching for a long time, they still couldn't find a single person. The cultivators who were lucky enough to survive all paid attention to hiding their whereabouts. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't waste his time looking for him. Instead, he waited quietly. In any case, every once in a while, a treasure would appear somewhere on the battlefield. At that time, those hidden cultivators would inevitably jump out to participate in the competition. That was the best time to eliminate opponents and increase the harvest. It was not worthwhile to just wait. So every time Lu Yi would lead Dumbo and the others to a place where the starry sky energy gathered, so that they could cultivate and recover. This way, while keeping them in their best condition, it could also conceal the traces of him activating the talent tree to devour the surroundings. While waiting, suddenly there was a trace of Qi-Ji rushing over from a distance. When Lu Yi turned his head to look, he saw a rainbow light. That rainbow light was obviously the eruption of abundant qi and blood. Judging from the power of the person coming, it was obviously a body cultivator. The other party didn't come with good intentions. He was rushing over here. Lu Yi didn't care too much about it. The main reason was that he had experienced many similar scenes during this period. There were always some people who wanted to bully their team because their overall cultivation was not high. But the result was often not satisfactory. As the distance kept getting closer, the body cultivator's momentum became stronger and stronger. It seemed that he was going to defeat them in an instant. Such a movement startled the 4 women who were cultivating and recovering peacefully. They couldn't help opening their eyes together. In an instant, the body cultivator approached within 30 miles. In the past, no matter who the 4 women were, they would at least wait attentively, even if they didn't panic. But after experiencing so much, the 4 women had long become indifferent. They just looked coldly at the body cultivator, waiting for Lu Ye's order to get into formation and teach the other party a lesson. This scene undoubtedly caused the body cultivator to feel bewildered. Under such a situation, the 5 of them could either fight or flee, yet they were just standing there silently and waiting on the spot. It was more or less puzzling, and it caused him to be unable to help but arouse a trace of a bad feeling in his heart. But there was no turning back. He could only continue to urge his own power. The distance was a bit closer. At this moment, Lu Yi, who had been staring at the body cultivator, suddenly turned around. The blood-red long saber spun in his hand, held in a reverse grip, and stabbed straight at where Crooked Teeth Chong was. The calm expression of Crooked Teeth Chong suddenly changed. At this moment, she even felt that her soul had flown out of her body. She didn't understand why Lu Yi would attack her. Specks of light bloomed in her field of vision, like a group of falling stars. The cold killing intent and violent attack made Crooked Teeth Chong absent-minded. She instinctively widened her eyes in shock. The expected pain did not come. The blood-red long saber brushed past her cheek and cut off a few strands of her hair. At the same time, the sound of spiritual power colliding came from behind her. There was someone behind her. Crooked Teeth Chong immediately reacted. In any case, she was still a constellation. Even if she was suddenly startled, she quickly understood what had happened. Fa Wuzuan's saber was not aimed at her, but at the enemy behind her. To be able to approach her like this without anyone noticing, it must be a ghost cultivator. Moreover, his strength was much stronger than hers. Otherwise, she, who was also a ghost cultivator, would not have been unable to detect it. She immediately thought of the female ghost cultivator who had been following behind the group a few days ago to pick up scraps. If it was this person, she really wouldn't have been able to detect it. They were both ghost cultivators, and she was from the ghost clan. In this aspect, she was several streets ahead of her. But in Crooked Teeth Chong's perception, the ghost cultivator behind her was not from the ghost clan. Because the aura was not right, this undoubtedly meant that an unfamiliar ghost cultivator was sneakily attacking her. It was very likely that the ghost cultivator was in the same group as the body cultivator who came to attack. The body cultivator made such a big noise to attract their attention, while the ghost cultivator lurked secretly on the side and waited for the opportunity to attack. This was the most common and practical trick used by the cultivators. She broke out in a cold sweat and wet her clothes. If Fa Wuzuan didn't react quickly just now, she was afraid that she would have been killed. Almost at the moment when Lu Yi pulled out his saber, Dumbo had already raised the formation plate and quickly poured spiritual power into it to activate the power of the formation plate. They had been fighting side by side for several days. It could be said that they were already very familiar with each other. When Dumbo activated the power of the formation plate, everyone's chi momentum had already been connected. In the blink of an eye, the formation was completed. The figure of Black Tortoise, which was shaking its head and wagging its tail, suddenly appeared. Its shape was fierce and full of power. Then there was a burst of saber light and sword shadow. Before the ghost cultivator who tried to sneakily attack Crooked Teeth Chong could figure out what had happened, he was shrouded by extremely violent and sharp attacks. He died in the blink of an eye. The defense of the ghost cultivator was not strong, and when he attacked, he concentrated all his strength in the attack and neglected his own defense. How could he survive such a counterattack? Lu Yi picked up his spiritual treasure and storage ring, and turned his head to stare at the body cultivator who had approached within 10 miles. He also felt lucky in his heart and had to thank Ghost. Because this guy appeared near the team from time to time and took the opportunity to take advantage of the situation, even in the state of rest, he had never relaxed his vigilance. He was afraid that this guy would suddenly come out and harm his precious team members. Although she had never shown this intention, there were some things that he had to guard against. Otherwise, he really might not be able to save Crooked Teeth Chong in time just now. Because he had been maintaining the Black Tortoise formation, Crooked Teeth Chong's position was a little far from him. If he hadn't noticed it in advance and stopped the ghost cultivator when he really attacked, it was absolutely too late. The body cultivator who attacked him had a stunned expression. He and his ghost cultivator companion had worked together for several times. It had always been smooth and they had a lot of gains. Even the cultivators at the later stage of Constellation Realm had been killed by them before. He never thought that his ghost cultivator companion would actually fail to deal with a middle stage and 4 early stage cultivators. Not only did he fail, he even lost his life. Seeing the Black Tortoise formed by spiritual power charging towards him, the body cultivator did not dare to face it head-on. The ghost cultivator was killed, of course, because of his carelessness, but it also showed the strength of the enemy. Especially the fact that the 5 of them could actually form a formation. This was something they had never encountered before. If the 5 of them did not form a formation, he would have the power to fight. His cultivation was higher, so he might have a chance against the 5 of them. But with the enemy in a formation, how could he fight? While secretly cursing the ghost cultivator for being useless, he turned around and ran. However, at such a close distance, even if his cultivation was higher, it would be difficult for him to escape. As Lu Yi exploded a drop of blood essence and used the blood escape technique, the surface of the spirit energy tortoise was suddenly dyed with a layer of blood, and its speed increased sharply. After a while, the body cultivator gritted his teeth and stopped, ready to fight. There was no other way, he could not escape. His heart was full of anger. As the party with the higher cultivation, it was undoubtedly very embarrassing to be chased by the party with the lower cultivation. He immediately decided to use all his means to test the other party's ability. Anyway, his skin was rough and his flesh was thick. As long as the other party's strength was not too strong, he basically did not have to worry about his life. After this test, his liver and gallbladder were torn apart. The middle stage cultivator in the lead slashed a few times, and the body cultivator's protective spiritual power was on the verge of collapse, showing signs of breaking. If he had not experienced it personally, he would not have dared to believe that a middle stage cultivator could have such violent and fierce killing power. He could not understand how the 5 of them formed the Black Tortoise formation, which was good at defense, so how could their attacks be so powerful? While he was shocked, he madly urged his own chi and blood. In the blink of an eye, the place where he was wrapped in a dark red color. The dark red blood energy had the mysterious ability to slow down the enemy's figure. He wanted to use it to delay the enemy's speed and space to move, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. The effect was there, but it was still difficult to change his fate. As Lu Ye's long saber slashed down, the Xing and Yu sisters' sword river erupted. The body cultivator's defense was completely broken, and his whole body suddenly became tattered and scattered. Chapter 1424. The battle ended, but no blood was spilled. Lu Yi raised his hand and picked up a piece of the body cultivator's corpse. Taking a closer look, it was clearly a piece of wood. Moreover, in the instant the enemy died, Lu Yi had clearly sensed a mysterious energy surging from a certain direction. It was as if the body cultivator had switched places with something in that instant. Death substitution puppet. Lu Yi immediately understood what it was. Lu Yi had once read about the death substitution puppet in the dwarf race's Rest Abyss pavilion. This thing could be said to be the most powerful life-saving item, because it could replace the cultivator who refined it to die once. However, this kind of thing was extremely complicated to refine, and the materials required were extremely rare, so there were not many of them in the entire starry sky. Even if there were, they were treasured and rarely seen by ordinary people. Only the most outstanding juniors of some major forces would be equipped with them in case of an accident. The dwarf race had a kind of talisman called the Death Substitution Talisman, which had the same effect as the Death Substitution Puppet, but only sunshine powerhouses could refine it. In comparison, the Death Substitution Puppet's effect was undoubtedly better, because the cultivator could place the puppet in a safe place in advance, and when the cultivator was about to die, they could switch places with the puppet and let the puppet bear the disaster for them. The Death Substitution Talisman was not good, because it had to be refined into the body. Simply put, even if the cultivator with the Death Substitution Talisman could escape a disaster with the help of the red talisman, they would still appear nearby. If they could not escape in time, they would still die. Now that the body cultivator had disappeared, and only the remains of the Death Substitution puppet remained, it undoubtedly meant that he had switched places with the Death Substitution puppet. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked into the distance. The corners of his eyes twitched, and he felt a little pained. If he had known that the body cultivator had such a divine item like the Death Substitution puppet, everyone could have sat down and discussed it. If the other party was willing to use the puppet to buy his life, then it was not impossible to negotiate. But now, the puppet was useless, so there was no need to discuss anything. A treasure like the Death Substitution puppet was definitely not something that the body cultivator had the qualifications to own. Lu Yi guessed that it was most likely a treasure that the other party had snatched from this battlefield. This thing was really priceless. If he really took it out to sell, the major forces would definitely fight over it. After all, which family did not have a few outstanding juniors? Buying this item was equivalent to having an extra life, an extra layer of protection. Throwing away the remains of the puppet, Lu Yi led Dumbo and the others to chase after the puppet before the power of the blood-escaping skill disappeared. Perhaps because of his confidence, the body cultivator didn't place the puppet too far away from him. Thus, when he switched places with the puppet, Lu Yi was able to catch a trace of it. All of a sudden, a blood-colored rainbow pierced through the void. At the same time, in that direction, two figures were fleeing at high speed. One of them was the body cultivator. However, at this moment, this fellow was in a sorry state. Although the puppet could replace death, it could not replace injuries. His previous injuries were still intact, causing his aura to be somewhat weak at the moment. Beside him was a young man who was only at the middle stage. Including the ghost cultivator that Lu Yi had killed earlier, this was a team of 3 people. One of them was at the mid-stage, while the other 2 were at the late stage. The task of this middle-stage youth was to find a target to attack, and at the same time, to protect the body cultivator's puppet. After finding a suitable target, the body cultivator and the ghost cultivator would work together to attack. During this period of time, the 3 of them had been working together like this, and it was very pleasant. In the end, when the body cultivator appeared beside the youth with a horrified expression, it really gave him a fright. "Who did you meet? Where's Old Black?" The youth tried his best to escape as he asked nervously. He already had a bad feeling in his heart, but he didn't dare to believe it. The body cultivator said angrily, "He provoked someone he shouldn't have. Old Black is already dead." The youth couldn't help but be absent-minded. Although ghost cultivators didn't have strong defenses, it was actually very difficult to kill them. This was because they would often flee thousands of miles away if they missed their target, appearing and disappearing unpredictably, making it difficult to track their whereabouts. Moreover, Old Black was a late-stage ghost cultivator. This trip was supposed to deal with 1 middle-stage ghost cultivator and 4 early-stage ghost cultivators. It should have been a piece of cake, So how did he end up in such a situation? Not only was Old Black dead, but the body cultivator's puppet had also disappeared. This undoubtedly meant that he had also died once. How strong could those people be? At this moment, the youth's heart suddenly tightened. He vaguely felt that he was being locked on by a powerful aura. When he turned around, he saw a red light rushing from afar, chasing after him relentlessly. The body cultivator also sensed it, and his face was full of grievances. This ghost won't go away. They're going to kill us all. What should we do? The youth asked. The death of his two companions had filled him with horror. He admitted that he was no match for the enemy and was momentarily flustered. The body cultivator's expression flickered for a while before he reluctantly sighed. Accept your fate. Do. The youth looked at him in surprise. I can't escape. They caught up to me just now. I'll withdraw now. You're on your own. As he spoke, the body cultivator decisively withdrew from the battlefield. They were just temporary companions, so naturally, there was no deep friendship between them. When things were going well, they could still help each other, but once they met with difficulties, they could only fly off separately. The body cultivator's figure disappeared. The youth sighed heavily and could only follow him. Lu Yi, who was chasing from afar, couldn't help but stop. He had only come to chase after the body cultivator because he was very distressed by the consumption of the puppet. He was prepared to teach the body cultivator a lesson, but he didn't expect that the other party had a companion hiding in the dark, exposing his whereabouts. But thinking about it carefully, this was a matter of course. The puppet that the body cultivator placed outside needed someone to watch over and protect, so leaving a companion not to show up was a normal choice. Now that both of them had left, Lu Yi had nowhere to vent his pent-up anger. What's that? Kai Yu's eyes were sharp, and she suddenly saw something in the place where the youth disappeared. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked over, and sure enough, he saw something unusual over there. His heart couldn't help but stir, and he hurriedly rushed over. When he arrived, he discovered that it was a jade plate. Lu Yi raised his hand and picked it up, carefully sizing it up. He found that this jade plate was only the size of a palm and didn't look special. He tried to pour spirit qi into it, but there was no reaction at all. What's the use of it? Kai Xing asked curiously, and the other three looked at him eagerly. Lu Yi shook his head. I don't know for the time being, but this should be a treasure unique to the battlefield. The reason for such an inference was that this thing was left behind after the youth disappeared, so it must be something that couldn't be taken out. In other words, this thing could only be used on this battlefield. Lu Yi tried to put it into his storage ring, but found that he couldn't do it. There was a layer of invisible force obstructing him, which further confirmed his conjecture. This was indeed a treasure that could only be used on this battlefield. Looking at it this way, the three-person team's luck was pretty good. They had a puppet and a jade plate of unknown use. Unfortunately, they found a team that they couldn't beat, and they were badly battered. Lu Yi studied it for a moment, but he still couldn't find the main point, so he gave the jade plate to the others to investigate, but they still couldn't find any clues. This was very troublesome. There were all kinds of strange treasures in the Chaotic Battle Club. The few of them had snatched a few before, but apart from the two purple amulets that had some value, the others didn't have much use. Now, they couldn't even figure out the use of this spoil of war. You take it. Lu Yi threw it to Crooked Teeth Xiao. Since it was a treasure, he couldn't just throw it away. Maybe it would be useful at some point. Dumbo was responsible for the twin chi-connected array, and the Xingyu sisters sometimes had to assist him in attacking. Only Crooked Teeth Xiao seemed to have nothing to do, so giving this unknown treasure to her was undoubtedly the best choice. Crooked Teeth Xiao took it. The 5 people still maintained the Black Tortoise array, and the power of the array plate wasn't activated. Each of them urged their spiritual power to rush forward, seeming to be aimless. After a while, Crooked Teeth Xiao suddenly said in surprise, "This thing has a reaction." Lu Yi hurriedly stopped and turned to look at her. Crooked Teeth Xiao fiddled with it for a while, and showed a look of realization. This jade plate is a map of the battlefield. It can show the detailed situation of the entire battlefield. Saying so, She threw the jade plate to Lu Yi. Lu Yi took it to check, and found that as Crooked Teeth Xiao said, there was no reaction no matter how he tried. At this moment, he could clearly perceive the mystery of the jade plate. This was a map of the battlefield. Not only did it record the topography of the entire battlefield in detail, but Lu Yi could even perceive many light spots of different brightness flashing in it. Lu Yi often used the 10 points map and the star map, so he was naturally most familiar with this thing. He immediately understood that those light spots represented the cultivators in the Chaotic Battle Club, and the brightness of the light spots represented the level of their cultivation. Just like at this moment, in the center of the map, there were 5 light spots converging. One of the light spots was slightly brighter, while the other 4 had almost the same brightness. This represented the 5 of them. Lu Ye's cultivation was higher, so the light spot was naturally brighter. Previously, when his team of 5 was refining the starry sky energy, how could they be found? Lu Yi thought it was just a coincidence. After all, they didn't hide their whereabouts. If there were cultivators passing by, it would be normal for them to see their traces. Now, it seemed that this was not the case at all. The other party was specifically looking for them. It was because of this jade plate's effect. The light spots represented by the 5 soft persimmons on the jade plate were very clear. If he didn't pinch them, who else could he pinch? How did it activate? Lu Yi asked. This thing was a good thing. With this jade plate in hand, he could know the whereabouts of all the cultivators on the battlefield like the back of his hand, so he didn't have to worry about not being able to find them. However, he first had to figure out how to activate its power. I just casually urged my spirit chi, and it activated. Crooked Teeth Xiao explained. Lu Yi couldn't help but be at a loss. He had clearly done the same just now, so why didn't it work? He had a faint guess in his heart, but if he wanted to verify it, he still needed to wait for a while. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.